Thank you all very much for coming. I know I'm looking forward to this great program that Jean Rochelle, who's the chair of the CANGC Programming Committee, put together today. I just wanted to share that when I was actually on my way from Sacramento this morning in the airport while I was waiting for my flight on the news, they were covering a story about xeriscaping and the changing face of landscape. This in particular, this story was about Southern Nevada, but just as a testament to how timely this topic is and how influential what we're going to be talking about is today, I just wanted to share that. So thank you all for coming, and I'm going to introduce Scott Klittich, who is the president of CANGC, who will introduce Jean Rochelle. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Amy. My name is Scott Klittich, owner of Otto & Sons Nursery up in Ventura County, and been chairman now for 2 years. I'm going on my second year here. It's a great organization. I want to just review a few things that, one of the things that our organization, California Association of Nurseries and Garden Centers, does, our mission statement, to promote and protect the interests of the California nursery industry. That's something that this program is right in there. You know, what we do, we are the unifying voice for the nursery industry. And our core value statement, effective listening, clear communication, member participation are required to deliver the transparency, accountability that is fundamental to CANGC sustainability through our second century. A couple things that the association has been working on recently is that we just received a grant for $270,000. This grant will establish a web portal where growers can put plants up and what their inventories are, and then individuals can go and look at that and order and find materials they're looking throughout California. Something neat about that also, it'll be in English and Spanish. So we should hope to get that going by the end of next year. It should be up and running. We also work with the California Grown Board, and the California Grown Board has you've seen that the label says California Grown, the blue and yellow sticker on a lot of items, and they've authorized nurseries that have pots that they can put that on their pots. So when it's printed, it can be in different colors, not just the typical blue and yellow. It could be in black and yellow or different colors that they approve of. So if you have pots, I know there's some pot guys here, and so there might be some pot guys here too. So if you have those, you can check with your vendors and see if they can put that labeling right on your pot if you're a California grown person, getting it approved through that. And one more thing I want to mention. In regards to ACP, I know we've got a real nice display over here, ACP and HLB. The Nursery Association is working on protocols so that when HLB arrives, and they say it's only a matter of time, not if, but when HLB arrives, how will retail nurseries then be able to sell citrus, if at all? So they're working with all the parties to create a method to be able to do that. With that, I also want to mention some of our board here. Ashley Rossi, where'd she go? She moved. There's in the corner, Ross. She's my vice chairperson. Randy Baldwin is a director. Where's Randy? Right over here. San Marcos Growers. Ashley's with Green Acres up in Sacramento. Randy's San Marcos Growers in Santa Barbara. Glenn Inamoto, American Horticulture in Oxnard, and then Jean Rochelle, TNR Lumber, right here in the corner. He's got to put the program together. He was his idea, his finding the right people, and he pulled his hair out to put this thing together. It's just amazing, you know. So Gene, here you go. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Scott. Oh heck. I am very gratified to see the turnout here today. We put this together pretty quick, but we think it's a timely topic. I was speaking with a client last week. He said, well, you know, we've gotten rain now, we've got snowpack. Why are you bothering with the drought workshop? And I told him, you know, Noah didn't build the ark when it was raining. You know, we've got to look forward. I think it's a pretty safe bet that what we've seen in the past couple of years is continue. Our water resources are we have limited resources. Even in good times, we have limited resources given the population growth we're going to be seeing. And no matter what, people have babies, and they have to have houses to put them in, so there's still going to be development. So I think what we're going to see here today is going to be pertinent, and the people that are looking forward are going to benefit from it. There's nothing wrong with making money, right? So with that, I would like to introduce our first speaker, Mike Evans. Mike is the founder of Tree of Life Nursery. He's about to pass a millstone in his career. You're coming up on 40 years of Tree of Life, Mike, is that right? Close, okay. He's been a CCN Pro since the mid-'70s and past president of IPPS, International Plant Propagator Society. So give it up for Mike Evans, everybody.
Thank you, Gene, and thank you very much to all of you and for the invitation to be part of this afternoon conference. So I brought a few slides. If we could maybe turn out the lights, and I'll get right into it. No turnout lights? It does? That'd be good. Anyway, the title, and it's a real privilege to be on the program with Bob Perry and with Wendy Proud, and I've got a few more things about our relationship over the years as colleagues and working together in different projects. So it's great to sort of collaborate on this topic. The title it would really be unfair if I just brought in pictures of what I thought were ugly landscapes, because that would be critical and cynical and not productive, and maybe it would be your neighbor's yard. Probably wouldn't be yours, though. And so I did not do that. You won't be seeing pictures of ugly landscapes. But the idea of ugly is not a turf substitute is simply to remind us that in the sort of panic mode that we're in often, where homeowners especially, and agencies and municipalities and schools and whatnot want to get on that rebate money. And so without a good plan or a good idea for garden design, out goes the turf and in goes, have you seen this theme garden called 10 Random Succulents on Drip Swimming in a Sea of Mulch? You seen that one? Yeah, I've seen that too. Gravel's nice, actually, depending on where you are. I actually appreciate colored rock and cow skulls and wagon wheels in Yuma, Arizona, in a trailer park. But I seriously do appreciate, I think that is iconic. But, and not ugly. But the 10 random succulents on drip swimming in a sea of mulch won't cut it. And so I don't have any pictures of those, but you know what I'm talking about, right? So the water districts, and this is one of the most progressive, the Irvine Ranch Water District, but I'm afraid on this giant poster that I saw on arrival, brown is the new green, and then the word survival, they got to rework this. Because maybe brown as a transition toward the new green, I could dig, and nobody wants to survive, we all want to thrive. So while I respect IRWD, and Bob Perry worked with them in the 80s and in the 90s on water audits and real serious conservation and research and data collection on water use in the landscape, it's a no-nonsense water district when it comes to the idea of water conservation. But I don't think this is the message that we would like to continue. Brown is the new green, because nobody really wants brown. So here it is a beautiful home in San Marino, and if this is your home, I look forward to having coffee with you later after the deal here. And this is a recent photo. This is not taken in the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s. The sprinkler system probably came in the 50s, or on any of those decades. It was taken about 3 or 4 months ago. And the other homes on the block are like this, and they were watering in the middle of the day. And in fact, something inside me says that all of us in California should save water the best we can so that the people in San Marino can continue to water their lawns like this, because it really is part of the DNA of this community. Now that said, that's tongue-in-cheek, because it really is not sustainable. And, but yet, a display of opulence. Think about the watershed when these homes were built, or when Pasadena and the surrounding communities were being built. The water table was quite high. The ranches and orchards were being irrigated by surface irrigation, songhus and little creeks and rivers and irrigation ditches. It was a completely different era. And so they showed off the wonderful capability of California to grow all kinds of plants. If this turf were to be removed on a rebate, first of all, they probably don't need the money. But if they were to take the rebate, it would be a real challenge for a designer to do something with this space to complement this home properly. And it would probably require courtyards and hardscape and enclosures and playing off the architecture. So it's not easy. So we're talking about, when we talk about removing and replacing turf, not targeting useful turf, but useless turf. And we've all known this for many years. So whether it's a HOA or a school or a homeowner that has turf or a turf grass lawn, or here in the case of the center medians and the parkways, which are the biggest culprits, these are the areas that are not being used and should definitely be removed. And they should be then planted to gardens, not just assemblages of plants. So consider the space and design, and this is the key, that there is an opportunity here for we who are horticulturists to promote outdoor use and gardens, not just decoration. That's what I want to really get into. This is our nursery in San Juan Capistrano. Hope you'll come see us. We built a bunch of buildings and had a great site to begin with old sycamore and oak. And so our buildings and our place look like old California with straw bale construction that emulates historic adobe buildings. And so we're trying to sort of showcase a lifestyle as well. So the first rule in landscaping in the name of turf replacement would be make it beautiful. Okay, since the title of the talk had the word ugly in it, we're going to start with make it beautiful, and it should be. Now we come from a perspective of native plants, and so my slant today is on California native plants. Obviously, when we're talking about theme gardens, we're talking about beauty in context, and that has to be emphasized. And we also have to say that there's no question that native plants are adapted to this environment, to these soils, to these conditions, and to this rain cycle, and will do very well in the garden with very little or no supplemental irrigation. Next, we want to make our gardens purposeful, and this is where I like to write a narrative. I recently helped my friend Chris Soltis over here, he's in attendance today, with a plant list for a job they're designing. And when I am asked to do that, I have a chapter at the top of the page, and it says narrative. And I write a paragraph or two. I hope this helps me with my writing skills. We all need help now and then, so stay honed, write paragraphs. What is the story? There was an artist called Sam Hyde Harris. He was a desert painter, and he told his students, what is the artist trying to say? Is it worth saying? And when the painting is finished, did you tell the story? Did you say it? So what's your narrative? What is the purpose of the garden, whether it's decorating or a parkway, or you're going to walk in, or a little tiny pot with a boulder and some gravel mulch. Now make it functional. So that is for people to use. But it also, you must know that when native plants are employed, it will function as habitat. It will attract hummingbirds and songbirds, butterflies, beneficials, pollinators, your occasional lizard, and who knows what at night, raccoons and others if you're lucky, coyotes, bobcats, grizzly bear, we could only wish. So the idea, I think we should bring back the grizz. That would really put the fear of God into most of the HOA pet owners. So it will function as habitat. So let's talk about this water conservation. We've already heard that it's good you heard a news story on the flight down about water conservation. Gene had somebody say that it's rained and it snowed, so what's the big deal? This is not new, ladies and gentlemen. In 1976, which is in our sort of realm of horticultural industry topic, there was a severe drought and there was a focus on landscape plants. And it was the time when everyone was, remember that? It was a shower with a friend, save water. Yeah, that was cool. My son was born in 78. 1980s, xeriscape came and went because nobody could spell it or pronounce it or knew what it meant. 2000s, we had the California Friendly plants by Metropolitan Water District of Southern California. That was their slogan, and for at least it had the word California and friendly. Okay, we can get along with that. 2013, we start seeing the effects of serious drought, serious impacts, more people than ever, hotter and drier than ever, no new water supply, and a serious drought that's not only affecting the local conditions, but the big picture water supply in California. So it's never been quite so dramatic, and the crisis is on. Okay, so can you see these? I guess, yeah, the lights are fine. Okay, so we're a technological society. We like to solve problems with technology whenever we can. And so technology sprang to the ready, and with smart timers, way, way smarter than they need to be, and controllers, and gadgetry, and drip, and overhead sprinkler, and recycled water, reused water, and public service announcements on billboards. We get it, but the question is, are we becoming enamored with the idea that you can program your oven and your time clock to water your garden from your iPhone while you're on vacation somewhere, and forgetting that what started all this was ideas called gardening, called being outdoors, enjoying nature and beauty. So while technology has its place, it's not the answer by itself. So native plants and native plant gardens have been speaking this very quiet story for a long time, and they have passed the test of time. This is not a brand new idea. In every region of California, the Bay Area, LA, San Diego, over the many, many decades, back to the turn of the century, and I mean the 1900s, we had horticultural heroes who spoke this story, and all that we're doing, in those of us that are involved in this now, is just picking up where they left off, maybe adding a chapter here and there with some new ideas, but nothing is brand new, because native plants were being shipped and the propagules to England in the late 1800s because of their absolute beauty and the diversity of their beauty. I like to say that just the odds, just the mathematical possibility of 5,000 types of plants in California, and if you rolled the dice on 5,000, some of them are going to roll up pretty. Okay, so there's some very, very beautiful plant material here. So gardens are places that should invite us to slow down. Okay, and this is a beautiful little courtyard at Rancho Los Alamitos, and I'd like to just read a quote and then listen carefully, because at the end I'll say who wrote it and when. So after a long article about this very topic, drought and the landscape, we read, "The net result is that we have become a state of people who have forgotten or have never really discovered where in the world we live. We have not really come to terms with living in the Mediterranean climate of California. Furthermore, we have become so detached from nature through dependency on modern technology that we have developed a lifestyle largely independent of the climate and landscape. Air conditioners cool us, furnaces warm us, and a pipeline at the end of modern man's most audacious control over nature, the California Water Project, has supplied us with unlimited water. The great nursery industry, yay, has provided a cornucopia of plants from all over the world. Sod farms produce instant lawns. We are an impatient race, and we expect instant results, instant gardens. Real estate developers know this and now spend millions to produce an instantly green landscape for new residential complexes. Landscape architects, many trained in the East, have contributed to this transformation of California into a green landscape. Without knowing it, we have become trapped into the dilemma we now experience. We have attempted to irrigate the entire state. We have somehow lost our way, and are now in a period of time in which crises are forcing us to reckon with nature." Russell Beatty, The Browning of the Greensward, Pacific Horticulture, 1977. Okay? It's the most sought after reprint from Pacific Hort in the history of the magazine. The Browning of the Greensward, Russell Beatty. In the same article, quote, "Extensive plantings of trees, shrubs, and ground cover should follow what Professor Bob Perry of California Polytechnic, Pomona, calls the ecological alternative." So Bob is quoted in 1977. He's here today, and that is the exact story we're still telling. Russ is also a consultant at Rancho Los Alamitos, and he and I are still in touch by email to this day. We're good friends. So the courtyard is a fine place to begin when you're talking about California and outdoor use. I like to say nature is complex but never complicated. And if, in fact, gardens are an extension or an interpretation of nature, then we should be getting our clues from nature, as in this photo of Torrey Pines State Natural Reserve, and then this painting, not the exact same scene, but also at Torrey Pines. And I think the most intriguing part of this painting by Mark Kirchhoff is that there's a trail. It comes right up to where the artist is standing, and you can see it going off and down and around the point, and it draws you into the painting. And I think that's what gardens do, is that they invite us in. This is a buckwheat, one of the common plants at Torrey Pines, ceanothus, some of the wonderful native plants that we can use. So look how simple the lodge at Torrey Pines is. This landscape plan would be pretty basic. There'd be a circle there for that opuntia, and the rest would be this great hardscape patio. This is, by design, quite austere and quite plain. But the shadows and the overhead canopy and the simplicity of it is the point of the photo. And then when we are talking about accent plants, let's use them as accents. I think quite often we see the groupings of accent plants in the idea to make a very sort of audacious garden, and it often comes off a little bit hard. So simplicity is an understatement. Russ also writes, a garden is a symbol of nature. We express in the creation of a garden our view of nature. I think this is really key. It's a symbol of nature, and we express our view. Now, we can go downtown LA and find a courtyard with modern everything all around and contemporary, mid-century, and yes, okay, so what's our story, right, the narrative? It's not going to be some rustic California DG courtyard. I get it. But it's still an interpretation of nature for that space and in that setting. With a rapidly urbanizing society, an increased detachment from nature has occurred. Gardens and the use of plants in the urban landscape have become almost purely decorative. Ornamental horticulture has led to cosmetic horticulture. The fascination with spectacular individual plants has detracted from sensible plant combinations which are functional as well as visually attractive. This was written in 1978 in an article by Russ, also in Pacific Hort, called Is Horticulture Too Ornamental? Complexity, though, can be quite effective, but you got to be careful. Here's a crazy succulent garden at the Sherman Foundation in Corona del Mar, and the attention to detail is fascinating. It's almost like snorkeling over a coral reef. If you've done that while on vacation in Hawaii, at least when I do, I got to get up on the beach and sort of debrief. Okay, I'm human, I breathe air, I walk on land, this is my real element, that out there was so bizarre, I don't know if it really happened, was that a dream? You know, and that's kind of what it's like to walk through a succulent garden, okay? So my question is, do we want this everywhere, like some kind of, you know, Alice in Wonderland trip, or do we want to reserve it for those special places? In addition, I'll go on record as saying that many of the succulents that are being touted as being so very drought tolerant have very shallow root systems, and in full sun in summer wither without a copious amount of water, or at least small amounts, but continually provided. But back to the complexity of a well-designed succulent or cactus garden, they're pretty amazing. And here's the details up close of the guy, Matt Maggio at the Sherman, who put marbles and broken glass and little rocks and fine little flowers and, succulent plants and a fountain planted with succulents. So, you can't get more complex than this, and it's very, very effective, but in its place. And that's the narrative. That was the story. So, the Japanese garden I want to talk about for a bit. The Japanese garden is basically the essence of simplicity. Now, by the way, in Japan, this garden would be called a garden, okay? And in Japan, this is also a native plant garden. Japanese gardens, by definition, are native plant gardens. Japanese plants in Japan, planted to look like nature, miniaturized, much tradition, many centuries of great, great horticulture to get nature to fit into a small space, like that plein air painting we saw. All of Torrey Pines fits into a frame. All of nature fits into a garden. And that's why I think they're such great examples of what we can do with space when we take out turf. Not plant a Japanese garden. Maybe, if that's your story. But I'm talking about a California garden, which the model is the Japanese garden. Okay? And so it would look something like this. That would be our look. And we would not probably get into the super tradition of miniaturization and the little symbols of the lantern and the bridge and the rocks and whatnot, although we could certainly have points of interest in the garden. We do need one thing in every garden where possible, that the Japanese garden is key, and that's an entry, a focal point that gets you in, and paths. So here's Santa Monica Parkway's gone wild. There's a street, and there's a sidewalk, and there's a little dirt path in the big wide parkway that meanders through a wonderful native plant garden, and it's an absolute fine experience. In a Japanese garden, please know that there's a gate, it's a door. It's more than just to keep people out when it's closed. In fact, it's really not for that. It's to mark this difference. You're out here, come on in. This is a new place, a new experience, a new feeling, a new emotion, a new moment. And so you enter through a portal. And when you get in, all the elements of art, line, absence of line, space, texture, depth, color, everything is working. And it all works to look like nature. It's an interpretation of nature using native plants. So when we make our gardens, we're going to make them beautiful, we're going to make them functional, we're going to purposeful, we're going to make them functional, we're going to make them experiential. Take out the turf, put in a gate or a door and a path, and when the path, make it interesting and meandering and good surfaces, and slow down. That's the point. The man there with his ear to a piece of bamboo isn't crazy. There's actually a pool of water and a bamboo, there may be a name for this, I don't know it, and a little fountain sort of thing where a drip of water falls every now and then into the pool of water, ever so steadily. And if you put your ear up to one of the sticks which is waiting for you, you'll hear a musical note every time the drop hits the surface of the water. And so that's the whole purpose. You're walking through the garden, you stop, you see this, you crouch down, you listen to the little song for a while, you get up, you continue your journey. It's a wonderful thing. So the idea of a Japanese garden is absolutely causes us to slow down. And that means that the paths are intentionally rough, not you're going to trip and hurt yourself, but you can't run through. And they meander, and they go up and down. You go up a flight of stairs and down a ramp, and you could have gone around or not even dealt with that hill. But the idea was to get you up on that hill. Then there's a landing, a bench, a gazebo, a view of a pond, a waterfall, and all these things. So what a great opportunity to take out useless turf and put in true gardens that invite people in to experience them with hard surface walkways, and the idea that all the elements of this Japanese garden with Japanese black pine, Japanese maple, azalea, sword fern, moss, boulder, fountain, rock, woven slats, there you have it, okay? Turn it into California sycamore, Matilaha poppy, toyon, white sage, deer grass, DG patio, and a rail fence. Okay, California, Japan. California, Japan. We can do this, people, okay? So wild gardens like this one in a shopping center with no irrigation and a low-grade planter, rainfall only, and just exuberant diversity showing nature at its finest. So you include a feature in the garden. It could be a bird bath, a sundial, a bench, a pile of rocks, a cool plant, something, a compass rose on the ground, something that brings you to this spot and asks you to stay for just a little while. Of course, bonsai is the highest and most pure form of the Japanese horticultural art. And if you know about bonsai, you know that, long story, but when they are displayed, they're on a certain bench at a certain height. The bench is very nondescript. The backing behind the tree is very nondescript, very neutral, and that's it. And away from that display, about 15 or 20 feet, is another bench that you sit on, and that's the whole deal. You sit on that bench and you look at that tree, and you do it as long as you want. And while you're doing it, your mind, you're out there, you're on that mountain, you're in that beach, you're on that hill, you're in that windswept place. So let's make our gardens restorative. They should also be part of the human experience, to where this big, beautiful part of a Japanese garden in Japan with this raked sand, what is that? Is that a desert? Is that a plain? Is that the water? Is that a lake? Is that the ocean? Are those islands? Your mind can do whatever you want with it. And then if you really want to go there, you can try latte and flavored latte and pumpkin latte, and then you can try some non-fat, and then you can go to just coffee and coffee au lait and Americano, and you'd go for it, man. But when you're done, just get some espresso, okay? Because that's coffee. And so if you really, and here we are, we're plants people, but the Zen garden, I mean, here it is. There's no plants. It's just sand and rocks. But the scale, this one is so fine. There's one in Portland that I know of that's wonderful, and this one's in Kyoto. And so when you get right here, you know, this, by the way, is where the path leads you when you're in that Japanese garden. So there's something to this restoration. Now, we're not going to sell a lot of plants by the idea of me promoting Zen gardens in place of turf. Okay, so that's not the point. The point is go into the garden also to heal our minds. So color back, still got it. So California has plenty of color, Dendromecon and Ceanothus in the wild, some iris there, which are native. And then just a fine plant, lemonade berry. It's almost too common and too easy. It's too obvious. It's everywhere around coastal plain of Southern California, and it's a wonderful tree here again at the Historic Lodge at Torrey Pines. Side note, and no story, but one of the facets of taking irrigation water away from turf is that trees are affected. This is a dramatic illustration of that fact because this is a coral tree, which, you know, it ain't gonna make it no how, no way. But the really valuable trees that are growing in, not coral tree, no offense or anything to coral tree, but this one was ready to go anyway, committed suicide. Valuable trees that are in irrigated turf, and the water district says stop watering the turf, and we do it, and the trees need our attention, another whole talk. Okay, so you might know you're watering too much if you got mallards that are just hanging out, okay? And so we're going to talk just real quick about irrigating. And we want deep, infrequent irrigations if there are irrigations at all. So we got this guy putting in this inline drip, which is quite popular right now, and I understand why, and I sort of understand why. It's mostly about not getting pavement, wasted water on pavement, or getting cars wet or wind blow. There's some use to it. It's difficult. Listen, it came out of ag, and it was long, straight lines of monocultures. And the irrigator used to leave that drip tape on berries, what, Randy, 6-8 hours all day, you know, to water a berry field. And the roots are this deep, you know, and they knew they had to leave it on a long time. And they didn't leave it on, and they didn't turn it on very often, only when the berries needed water. And we're talking about production here, lots of berries coming off those farms. So, and that's just one Southern California example of drip tape in ag. So it goes over to landscaping, and it goes on these grids, and depending on the soil type and the plant type and the desired use and the water quality, because quite often this is reclaimed water, in addition to all the other problems, this can actually, in my opinion, create more problems than it solves. Because I believe that if it's not handled properly, you end up with plants that are forever dependent on it, and disease problems can also occur. So here's turf replacement made complicated. Will these plants ever be taken off life support? Okay. Now, I said I wasn't going to show this, but I want to analyze this slide. There's salt buildup on the part of the parkway to the left because the turf that was in here was irrigated with reclaimed water. The ground under old turf is quite compacted. That's just a fact. The Carissa, given this location here, this isn't Corona del Mar, so it's probably not going to just kind of naturalize. The drip hose is there, and that's where the roots will go, by the way. I don't know about you, but the customers, when we give workshops, I say, look, when I lose my car keys and I look for them, when I find them, I stop looking. Okay, that's pretty silly. So when a plant's roots finds water, it stops looking. It doesn't just say, hey, I wonder what's out there, into dry soil. So these plants, aside from the sort of non-inspirational design, could have been planted in a deep, swale with meander, and the soil treated first, and the irrigation handled accordingly, etc. Here's irrigation made simple and effective. This is a planter bed, raised planter in Mexico. You can tell it's Mexico because the hose bib is painted white, and I love that. Because when this thing is full of plants, the guy's got to be able to find it, okay? And you got loose, sandy soil piled into this raised planter and low, and whatever's going to go in here, a representation of the outside desert or some tropical mess of croton and canna lilies and hibiscus and cup of gold vine, and who knows, but whoever plants it probably will just open the spigot for several hours once a month and call it good. So whatever method works, but what we do know is we have to get the water well away from the root ball and down deep. So whatever we can do in like this brand new planting to coax rainwater and irrigation water, if any, and Bob's going to be talking about some really interesting projects without sprinkler systems, and we want that water to be down away. Long-term sustainability, here's a center median by Bob Perry. No irrigation, the planting will blend in and naturalize. You'll see more of this. And then, within a stone's throw of the site, a slope by, nothing new here, where the landscape plants planted from large containers on a dry slope, in dry holes, on a dry day, with a sprinkler system that will blow in the wind, at what we call hurry-up landscape, will always need life support, okay? Even if they are so-called drought-tolerant or water conservation style plants, because of the technique and the method. Don't forget, in this drought, we've lost all our deep water. Anything that was down where deep roots are is dry. So it's going to take many, many dry, wet seasons to get what we used to take for granted back. So here's a turf replacement, needs people, doesn't have an invitation in, but maybe the narrative, to be fair, maybe the narrative was, we're not going to invite people in. So again, we can't say one size fits all. Write your story. What is needed on this turf replacement? A bench, a shade, something else? I don't know. Maybe it's just fine. But I do think that our topic is to get people to come into the garden and experience it. Here's a natural garden, white bark ceanothus, close live oak, yucca whippeli. Here's a similar look in a horticultural garden at Rancho Santa Ana Botanic Garden. We have some of our friends here today. And this is at the Cultivar Garden. And you can see that nature and our interpretation of nature can be very similar. So the California garden is by definition rustic, just like the Japanese garden is by definition an extension of the nature that you see in Japan. Our history and our climate calls for patios, hardscape, as well as decorative and beautiful entries into a usable garden. So you come in, you are asked in. The garden is alive and changing every day. We engage with it. So the path leads to, in this case, that yucca in bloom, or it could be something interesting like this pile of rocks. This is in one of our gardens at the nursery. The big picture is at Tilden Park in Berkeley, and quite frankly, it's just a path that goes around a little tiny loop. But while you're on it, I mean everybody, baby strollers and wheelchairs and all kinds of people, everybody can go on this path. You really think you're hiking in the mountains. It's really a cool experience. And just a little bit off the parking lot and around a little loop and back. But you go out into a natural place, and if you slow down, you can also go there in your mind and remember this or that hike in the Sierras or your experiences that you can recall here in California. And the little mound of rocks is nothing but that. We had some rocks left over. People say, what's that? I say, it's some rocks piled up in a little triangle. What's it mean? I don't know. You tell me. You know, we have other places where all good dogs go to their final resting place. That's a garden we call graveyard. We don't even mark those graves. This is a cool little thing that you just walk to, and there it is. So I think surprises in the garden are a feature that we can learn also from the Japanese garden and from many, many good, well-designed gardens. Golden Gate Park, Stanford University, the wonderful public gardens of America, all have experiential aspects. And I think that if we promote this in the name of turf replacement, we're doing more than just saving water or selling plants or planting plants. We're actually planting opportunities for people to experience beauty in their everyday lives. California icon plant called manzanita. Okay, so I ask, why do kids get to have all the fun? This is the children's garden at the Huntington, and it's a wonderful thing. It's all about this high. They've got fanciful plant shapes. They've got a little stream that meanders. Kids can run around. It's not a playground, but they can run and they can play. But they're really about sticking their hand in the water, jumping over the stream, falling down and skinning their knee, smelling the plants, touching the plants. There's some really good things for them to do in the children's garden. Okay, so the outdoors are not the indoors. Got that? I'm going to write that down. So we want to keep the outdoors looking and feeling and tasting and smelling like the outdoors. And we do when we design a garden, in this case for kids. And so I'm saying let's design some gardens for ourselves too, so that we can spend time in the moment, whether it's just on a patio, on a bench, potted plants around, or out on a long stroll, that our gardens, this was turf replacement in San Diego, old neighborhood, really fine old place, took out the lawn, in come the rocks, in come the natives, nothing really dramatic here, not a big opportunity, dig it out, swale it, put some basins, catch rain, that's another whole topic, and let it grow. And there's no irrigation system, there's no fancy maintenance required here. Once a year or so you come in and do a little trimming, and the butterflies, the lizards, the hummingbirds, the songbirds, the beneficial pollinators, the dogs that people are walking stop and notice this above every other garden. Okay, there's something going on here. So in the shade and the sun and the patio, we have to plan on spending time in the garden and promoting this as part of our industry message. So this is current. If you want to look it up, you can. The National Geographic. It's called, "This is Your Brain on Nature." It's a brand new article. Here's a quote, emphasis added. Excuse me. "It is a scientific fact that the occasional contemplation of natural scenes is Déjame empezar de nuevo. I'll try my best English this time. "It is a scientific fact that the occasional contemplation of natural scenes of an impressive character is favorable to the health and vigor of men, and especially to the health and vigor of their intellect." Frederick Law Olmsted. Okay, the fact is it's probably more intuition than science at the time, and women receive equal benefit. Okay, but this was a quote from the father, patron saint of landscape architecture, who said, it's important. You've got to be able to absorb beauty in order to be healthy. Also from the same article, "This is Your Brain on Nature," and I think this is pertinent to our industry. "Visits to parks are down. So are visits to the backyard. One survey found only 10% of American teens spend time outside every day." Okay, that doesn't bode well for people that are trying to promote outdoor gardens. If 10% of the future market is spending time outside every day, only 10%. This is science, by the way. These are studies. This is data. Okay, next one. "According to research by the Harvard School of Public Health, American adults spend less time outdoors than they do inside vehicles, less than 5% of their day." Okay, so we have a challenge. So as we build these beautiful California gardens, using nature as the model, asking people to come in and experience them, we need an honest narrative. We need them to be regionally authentic. We need them to be habitat. And when I say regionally authentic, this is the ecological approach that Bob Perry spoke about in his classes here on campus and in that article in '77. This is what our friend Wendy Proud, who will be speaking this afternoon and representing Mountain States Nurseries with over 40 years of growing these exact plants that are regionally authentic. She's going to be bringing that insight to us on the plants and their use. So honest narrative, regionally authentic plants, they provide habitat, everybody knows that. Conservation of energy, resources, ecosystems, etc. They're economic, that is, they don't require much care and water. They're experiential. This is the key to this sort of more philosophical edge of this, with their interpretive and regenerative values. And they are engaging. They revive the tradition of passive time spent in the garden. So come and visit us on the web or in person. We'd love to host you. In summary, we want to plant these gardens to be beautiful, purposeful, functional, experiential, and restorative, with emphasis on restorative. I think we really need both individually and as a society, the healing and the restoration that gardens offer. We got into this gig for one reason or another, and pretty much all of us can say it was because we wanted to be outdoors. And so let's live that, you know, and become part of the solution. So when you come to the nursery, you might see these guys playing music. This is Trio Los Dos Mas Uno. The guy on the keys is the Uno. The Dos is Hedgehog and Smooth Dog there. Yippee, we made it through the talk. Thank you very much. Hope I didn't go too long. Where are we at?
That was great, Mike.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
What was it? Los Dos Molinos? What was the name of the band?
Trio Los Dos.
Trios Los Dos.
Trio Los Dos.
Didn't he do a great job?
And then when you come and you bring your bass, it'll be Trio Los Dos Mas Uno. Anybody that walks on, we call it Trio Los Dos Mas Uno.
All right, I'll be there.
Okay.
All right, thank you, Mike. Our next speaker is Bob Perry. Bob is Professor Emeritus at CalPoly, Adjunct Professor of Landscape Architecture at USC. He's written numerous books on landscaping and dry climates, and since the early 80s, actually late 70s, right, Bob? Yeah. So let's hear it for Bob Perry. Thank you.
Thank you, Gene, and it's a great pleasure to be here today. And I've had the wonderful opportunity of following Mike as a speaker in other occasions, and do compliment him on his skill and ability to articulate with feeling and emotion so many ideas that I feel are significant. As is my cast in life, I tend to approach some of these issues in a bit more technical way, quantitative way. At times I can break down and get emotional. My wife will attest to that. But I think that as things have unfolded, and I didn't realize what Mike was going to say, our talks are going to fit together, I think, quite well, and have some information to share to you that does come from a bit of the quantifiable, testable, provable, observational basis. And as I do that, I really do want to say, remember what Mike said, because some of the ideas I'm talking about need to be absorbed, need to be assimilated in ways that we can be creative about applying them and working with them, and not just responding or reacting with technical answers or things without soul and feeling. And I think Mike captures that really well, and these ideas about why do we do design, what is our purpose in working with plants is hugely important. That's sort of the vision we're moving towards, and it takes many steps in getting there. So with that, let me see if I can get my program on here. May need a little bit of technical help getting out of one and into the other. Thank you. Okay, so as I was approached a couple of months ago by Randy Baldwin to participate in this gathering, we talked about different topics and issues to share, and Randy's aware of some of the things I've been doing, and in this regard we settled on rainwater harvesting, and something that is being embraced both by taking action at the county level, particularly in Los Angeles, to develop LID, low impact design requirements and standards, to just the general awareness that our issue regarding the use of water has many dimensions to it, and just the fact that we've been through a drought brings attention to the times when the availability of water, the volume of water, is part of the issue, but it also touches on other things. So as I move into this image here and paraphrase what these small letters are trying to say, the LID requirements are encouraging us to capture, retain, and find productive use for some of the rainfall that occurs across our state. And in contrast to decades of practice of taking water and trying to dispose of it during rainfall occurrences, we are now realizing it's of huge significance and can be used in very beneficial ways. Perhaps more importantly, and this is my scientific way of defining some of the beautiful things that Mike was describing, a sustainable landscape, a beautiful landscape, a healthy landscape, an engaging landscape, and one that helps heal us is one that has a balanced carbon footprint. And this is something where if you do study landscapes that humankind has conceived over the years, in contrast to natural systems and natural environments and the resulting natural landscapes, the natural landscapes have this positive carbon footprint relationship on this planet, and those of our construction and implementation and maintenance are not. And so from the very beginning, what I see right here is the idea of harvesting and infiltrating and using water in our landscapes is something that emulates what we see in nature, and therefore is very necessary to practice just for all these other reasons beyond the issue of we don't have enough water at times, drought cycles occur, our landscapes get stressed, we go into crisis mode, we have mandates to not use water, and things implode. And so in that manner, the idea of working with the resources that are naturally available is step number one in the foundation of creating healthy, viable, beautiful, experiential landscapes. So in this, I want to show you this project that Mike referred to in a little bit more detail and say that there are many ways of getting there, and this one does focus on the issue of water conservation and tries to bring attention to energy use and the resulting carbon footprint. So we have a 1 acre median located in Moreno Valley on Nason Street, so we affectionately call it the Nason Street median. Rather creative, don't you think? And we're seeing it with a whole future of potential lying before us. We're seeing, something here, a vision of plantings that will enhance the experience of driving down this road and completing what we think is part of our urban landscape. It's something that fits and finishes our environment. So we have 1 acre, which is a wonderful unit of measurement that we're all familiar with. And we have started to look at the issue of water and the future of the landscape, and started our design concept being informed about how much energy it takes to bring water from different sources to sustain any type of landscape here. And we'll discover how much water it takes if we were to desalinate seawater and make it potable for landscape use, or bring it from Northern California, or pump it from the groundwater reserves that are below the surface, or if we just simply take reclaimed and recycled water from local wastewater treatment plants. Now, just not thinking you can see these numbers very well, if you were to take an acre foot of desalinized water, it takes about 4,400 kilowatts of electricity for processing that water to make it useful. And if you associate that or extrapolate what is its carbon footprint, 980 pounds of carbon are being released into the atmosphere. So we know when we bring water from different sources, energy is used. That energy in many cases is based on fossil fuel combustion. You combust that fossil fuel, carbon is released. And that's the association here. Increasingly, I'm bringing this message into the landscape conversation because we talk about water, but it's really our management and distribution, our treatment and reuse of water that's connected to energy and connected to carbon. And right now, in addition to water in our local world, we have a global situation of carbon impact on the atmosphere, and we are contributing to it. And based on studies I do and my research and opinion at this time that I continue to try to substantiate, our landscapes throughout Southern California produce more carbon and release more carbon into the atmosphere through the pumping of water, the treatment of water, distribution and application of water alone, let alone the embodied energy and carbon footprint associated with plastics for pipes, for all the soil amendments we produce and fertilizers, for all the fossil fuels we use in our equipment to till and shape and auger and drill and make the land ready for our plants. Water alone simply breaks or bankrupts the system. So we take that and we come back into this situation, and we also compare it to another benchmark that we work with. It's the state model water conservation ordinance. In this, we have guidelines that tell us when you do new landscaping, you have a water budget you need to live within. So we did the water budget calculations. We took our 1 acre, we took our reference crop of turf grass, or the reference ETO of 60 inches per year. This is an area that gets 6 inches of rainfall on average. And so we take it, run it through the formula, and we come out with the state would certify or approve a design plan that would use approximately 1,200,000 gallons of water each year. And that's a form of conservation if we stay within those limits. So we have that as a budget. We have elected to not want to use any supplemental water once we have the landscape established and hydrated for that establishment purposes. So what we've done is go out into this project here. We have augered holes, trying to loosen the sides and make the soil as permeable as possible. And we've oversized the holes so that we can actually fill them with water. And this chart here shows our recipe for how many times we filled a hole before we put a plant in. We've looked at the texture of the soil, the water holding capacity, and looked at the field capacity, importantly, once the gravitational water has drained away. And we know how much water is available for plants to use, and have tried to produce a few calculations in that regard. And clearly, we've matched it with one of our cardinal points of how to establish landscapes of smaller is better, and plant diversity is good and adapted to the region. California native, Mediterranean is all part of a set of ideas that we find help an approach to landscaping of this nature succeed. So we've brought out these plants. We thank Wendy Proud and Mountain States Nursery for some wonderful southwestern plants, and we'll see those in a few minutes, along with other species that we find are hardy and tough, whether it's the rosemary from Europe or even the olive tree and species of this nature here. And so the Caesalpinia cacalico came from Mountain States Nursery. We had 1 gallon, 5 gallon, and we're required to plant 6 24-inch box olive trees, the Swan Hill fruitless species, for people wanting to have some immediate impact. Something which we knew, due to the size of the trees, the proportion of roots, the fact we were not going to water and keep hydrating a root ball that had been hydrated regularly under nursery conditions, we knew those plants would be challenged to survive, and that has indeed been the case. One of our favorite plants to this point in time, to point it out, is the Vista jojoba plant, beautiful evergreen shrub, and one that's performed remarkably well. So we have a diversity of plants, tended to plant small-scale plants, and in that regard, find plants that are adapted to the climate here. Soil testing was done. We did very minimal amending in the excavated materials from each plant pit, so you can see the basic list of materials and how we applied them. We did put, for trees, the perforated pipe filled with gravel, wanting to have moisture from rainfall be able to infiltrate and be absorbed and distributed down below in the lower portions of the root ball of the trees in particular. It leads me to say that the nature of these medians, this median was to have the soil slope towards the center line, so when rain fell or falls, it would collect and it would gravitationally flow to the center and to where the trees are planted. And in this way, wanted to have anything excess come into these pipes that could capture that water and draw it down more quickly into the soil. So a lot of little things were going on, along with the placement of a number of soil moisture probes, because we're really curious to see what the soil moisture profile was going to be over time. Now, doing the math, what we discovered is the way we hydrated these holes, filled the 1 gallons up 3 times, the 5 gallons up twice, the 24-inch box up just once, and the field capacity moisture content of that soil, most of these plants had sufficient moisture for the next 9 months. So we're planting in the spring, doing all this pre-hydrating, putting in the plants, watering them in upon completion, as you'll see. And we know that based on the size of the plant, leaf surface area, and moisture in the soil, they had a reserve of moisture to carry them through the summer. Many of our projects achieve this just in common practice of planting and hydrating and watering in. You just don't realize you're overwatering and you're resulting in a lot of water gravitationally moving out of the root zone. We work with organic mulch to try to reduce the surface moisture evaporation as well as suppress weeds. We are in deep Russian thistle country. And indeed, it's been a problem. There's nothing we could do to completely abate the invasion of Russian thistle in our median, even after it was cleaned and prepped and mulched and things like this. We had to go back and do a lot of weeding for the first year before things simmered down and stabilized. So with that, you're seeing the last watering. We've got it all in place. There are big pits around all these plants, so when it does rain, any water can flow towards it. The soil's loosened, and we're good to go now, walking away from the watering routine on this project and trying to save that energy cost associated with the piping and the trenching for the piping to the ongoing pumping and application of water. Importantly, we want these plants to grow within the conditions they have to the capacity that those conditions enable, and then we want them to go quiet. Without water, it's like our cars. They don't go anywhere. They do not produce photosynthesis, or they do not function, and photosynthesis does not occur. Plants just become immobile, and what they are doing is enduring and trying to hold on within the framework of heat and sun and wind and all the pressures that would desiccate them. And most of these plants are really tough. They're smart and shed excess leaves to their bark, and stem structure is really capable and adapted to the drying conditions of this environment. So we watered them that last time. We take these readings using the moisture sensor probe, and according to this first reading here, May, when the project was finished, we have a reading of 13. That means the plant's almost drowning. It's got plenty of water. We just finished the job, and it's telling us there's no tension here. So we say, great, little plant, and we have the Caesalpinia here that we're looking at as a test plant. Do note the little shoot right here is beginning to grow. That's part of the growth that occurred in the container. We then go on to another reading here, June. So getting past a little bit further, that shoot is still growing, and we're finding that the reading is 24. It means the soil is plenty moist, and there's plenty of moisture available to this plant. And we continue on down September, 199. We're still trying to figure out what 199 means other than it's really dry. There isn't any moisture for this plant to have, to continue to grow. We think this is great. We're not trying to provide water on a small basis all throughout the year to keep growth going throughout the year. We want it to grow cyclically, stabilize and stop and harden off. And at the end of September, things were really dry, and according to the scale on the moisture probe, there's no available moisture to the plant. And so we wonder what's going on, because later in December, the plant flowers and is looking fine. It's just not showing this type of stress that we may have initially anticipated. And want to say along the way in this regard, of the 2,200 plants that we planted in this median, we lost 15. Wow. And we continue to experiment and make observations. We do not like the performance of the deer grass. We've removed a lot of it. We've been putting in other plants to test them, to just continue to acquire experience here, to see how this process can work. Our goal on one hand is to say we can do a lot of landscaping like this without the full-scale assault of irrigation and inputs of materials and use of energies and resulting carbon release into the atmosphere. So these are images showing ongoing growth without additional water, and do want to say that you look at plants and landscapes, and this was easy, believe it or not, partly because small plants, small leaf surface area, big reservoir of water in the soil. Plants are growing. They're depleting that reservoir. We need some rain. Well, we didn't get a lot of rain, and so growth was limited by that, but survival was not. And ultimately, though, the plant gets bigger. We're getting rains this year. We had almost 3 inches in the last rainfall episode 2 weeks ago, and we're thrilled. The soils are being hydrated, and now another springtime of growth can occur. Ultimately, what happens, though, is particularly at the tree level, the tree gets very large incrementally year after year after year. It has more and more leaf surface area. It can use more water. It needs more water. And we calculated how many plants, spaced them, and said, you know, you're free to grow to your potential, but we're not going to overcrowd you and have you be really happy for the first 10 years, and then all of a sudden you're encroaching on your neighbor's territory, and you need more water because you have more leaves, so does your neighbor, and all of a sudden you reach a point where your planting has exceeded what rain would provide as the source of growth. So a lot of factors. These are complexities, and as I drive around through our urban environments and I look at wonderful, dense plantings, no wonder when we get a drought and we turn off our irrigation, these plants die. They do not have the moisture they need. And physiologically, they all need to grow, plants all need to grow a bit each year. Otherwise, they're in a state of decline. And we have just overplanted our landscapes tremendously, or looking at another way, we need to increase our irrigation to enable that landscape to keep growing and growing and staying as dense as we often choose to want it. So we finish up here with just a couple more pictures, and Acacia neura, mulga from center of Australia. It's just thriving here. The Acacia farnesiana, sweet acacia, hesperaloes, the sennas, I always like to call them cassia still. The senna here, planted from a 4-inch pot, you could barely see the 3 or 4 phyllodes when the plants were planted, and it's exploded into growth, almost too much so. So it's been remarkable to say, wow, an approach like this can really work, and rainfall can be the source, and the watershed is the 16-foot wide median. There's no runoff coming from the street because it's been crowned, something that in future projects could be done differently. So the bottom line here, which we're proud of, we say we save 1,200,000 gallons of water a year. If we had taken seawater, desalinated it, and used that water, we're saving 2,500 pounds of carbon from going into the atmosphere each year. If it's reclaimed water, 1,200 pounds of carbon. Groundwater is easy to pump out, not as much energy, not as much of a carbon footprint. We save only 425 pounds of carbon in the atmosphere, contributing to greenhouse gas warming effects, and so that's the least impact. And actually, I had State Water Project was 2,400. Desalinization, I'm not a proponent of desalinization until the technology gets much more energy efficient. 3,600 pounds of carbon would go into the atmosphere for the annual water budget that we could have used for a landscaping on this project. So our goal very much is to try to achieve in a landscape, through all these thoughts and ideas and studies and science, let's say, a balanced carbon footprint. We want these plants to grow and prosper, and we'll say for every pound of vegetation we produce in our landscape, or any landscape, 1/2 pound is sequestered carbon. So that's the industry we're in, is we're carbon sequesters, and every pound, 1/2 pound is what we're pulling out of the atmosphere. And so we're aware, we have down here, our design is intended to accrue close to 7,000 pounds of biomass when it's mature. That means we're gonna have about 2,700 pounds of carbon sequestered in the tissue of those plants when we really sharpen our pencils, and we will have released into the atmosphere 6,200 pounds of oxygen. And this is a Zen garden to me. It's got beauty, it's restorative. I'd love to walk out on it, except there's too much traffic. So this is a context that doesn't quite achieve garden status, but to me it's beautiful. And shift our attention now to something which I'm trying to avoid, and that's sort of the commercialization and quick impulse translation of rainwater capture and harvesting into our landscapes. So we have in the city of Montclair, not too far from here, a new tilt-up light manufacturing site, and they fall into the requirements to retain on site that first inch of rainfall that occurs during a storm event, and to hold it there and to infiltrate it and manage it and not let it run off all in the first flush. And so we see a simple rectangular landscape that's been shaped into a basin, and so we have a low lying area with the raised edges, and the landscaping is just being completed here. We have the source of our water here, huge amount of water. And in simple ways, it's like saying if you have pavement that's equal to your garden area and you harvest that water from the pavement and put it in your garden area, instead of us getting 12 inches of rain in Claremont, we get 24 inches of rain. Now you can take a few inches off of that, but that's doubling our rainfall, and I find that this concept, or that understanding, enables us to move beyond just native plants at times into other palettes that could be more water needy, particularly if they get that recharge over several months during the winter season. It's amazing how well plants, given the wintertime recharge of moisture, can grow within the proportion of the moisture that's available, quiet down as the moisture dissipates, go into summer and fall without much activity, and then pick it up again with the winter rains. And advocate, living within the cycle of this environment in those ways. And when you can harvest and double the water input during the winter months in such an easy way, it's easy to do. The thing that was not happening here is we take our big surfaces, roof and pavement, we bring it to our impoundment area, our infiltration basin, and currently the designs are relatively unimaginative, and if anything, they're biased, particularly in the areas where the water's to be retained, towards the wetland species, the bulrush, the juncus, the carex, the cattails at times, and ironically what we end up doing is once the water disappears, we turn the irrigation back on and we water for 9 months while we save water for 3. And this is not an inspiring design. It's very industrial, very minimal, and we have a whole world of discovery here to work with and learn about in making the capture, retention, and infiltration of the rainwater we get in much more creative ways. There are engineering things that are worked out. The basin is big enough to hold the rain, and if it's too much rain, that first inch fills up our basin, there's an overflow pipe. We have devices to bring water into the basin, to diffuse the energy of the water with the stones here. We're seeing water in one of these images, and we're seeing the above ground irrigation system. All that standing water is from the initial irrigation cycles to help establish these plants. And it leads me to say you really need to test your soils and understand how quickly water will infiltrate, because this is just irrigation water that's being applied too much and for too long. So I will shift it though and actually say opportunities abound, and like what happened at a Chevron gas station up on North Indian Hill in the city of Pomona, a few miles from here, where all of the pavement sloped to the sidewalk and to the street. They enlarged and constructed a little strip planter, and all of the water now will flow into this and will be impounded with an overflow pipe again, or outlet, to never have it breach or overfill this little planting area. And they've put in some very remarkably common plants from gazanias and Raphiolepis. The most striking thing perhaps is the desert mesquite, which it's in its element. This is a seasonal wash in one way of looking at it. And we have our inlets and we have our overflow components of this system. The thing that's lacking here, and that I often like to comment on, we need to pre-filter the water before it goes into the landscape and get better information about the capacity of our landscape plants to grow with the increasing contamination associated with particulate matter and various type of chemicals. Plants are carbon, oxygen, and hydrogen in composition. That's what they love. They want water, they want the sunlight, and they want some primary macronutrients and some minor amounts of secondary nutrients. And they do not like boron past a certain point, or just overload of any particular chemicals. And to think that they can be remediated by plants, we're making the plants sick, and eventually they're going to suffer and show that they cannot survive. So talking with Garden Wallace of Wallace Labs and looking at some of our rain gardens, and he takes soil samples from rain gardens that are adjacent to really dirty parking lots. Those soils are already within 2 to 3 years so contaminated that the plants are dying, and the solution is, well, take out all the soil now and take it to a landfill and put in new soil and put in new plants. And The most success I've read about is in Europe, in Germany, in places where this type of practice has gone on for years to collect and infiltrate and clarify water. You can get 30 to 40 years of good performance, but the system eventually becomes overloaded with the pollution. On the other note of this inlet right here, where water comes in carrying all this pollution, is a point of concentration. And where do we ever have a chance to capture concentrated pollution? It's at these input points. This is where you need a catch basin, filters, charcoal, and a few other things to capture. And yes, we have to clean those filters periodically, but it's a task that we can make efficient, and we edit that crap out of the environment. And it finally is washing all this stuff off our roofs and our streets, and we finally have a point in which we can recapture and manage that pollution. So how am I doing for time? Am I doing okay? That's very vague. 20 minutes? Okay. So you still with me? Yes. Okay, great. So do want to show you and invite you someday to go through the Claremont colleges, Pomona College in particular, that is embracing and attempting to really transform their landscape to as green as possible, to as native as possible, to as much Mediterranean climate as possible. So it's wonderful to see. And on one hand, we're just also beginning to discover that the traditional lawn and clipped hedge and formal tree plantings are at great risk. They do not integrate well with some of these other strategies to work with our environment differently. And so we have a blend or a combination of landscape types here. But upon completion of a new parking structure, this project had to go through all of the new standards and guidelines and the City of Claremont's attitude of green is better. And in this regard, generated a very large bioswale adjacent to a parking structure and an entry road onto campus. And having a wonderful greenbelt amenity of significant size, not a little strip around a Chevron gas station in this case, but something that can really evolve into a remarkable planted area. And have felt that this project has great success due to fitting the correct plants to the topography and where the hydrology creates moist conditions or dry conditions, as well as has a landscape that has relatively low maintenance needs. And just feel once again we're a bit timid and not yet ready to work with supplemental water in more creative ways as compared to putting in an irrigation system as a backup, and in the mid of summer start watering because things are paling out and going into their natural habit when there's no water. A couple of things I definitely would change. Historically, on the register of plants at the university, which the school really wants to protect, they have the coast redwood tree. And that's the last plant, California native, I would plant in Claremont, in Southern California or further south, based on the need for water and the increase of size and the leaf surface area and the additional increase of moisture with age. And generally say that when we do landscapes, we will set the irrigation schedule to establish it and then set it, whether smart controller or not, we will set it for the next 50 years to the same setting. In the meantime, our landscape's growing and its need for water is increasing. And if we don't get the rains, or if the tree gets too big, or if the roots are confined, like in the case of coast live oaks, and they can't sustain themselves, you're going to have stunted or disfigured or declining health in your plants. Most plants can sort of adapt to the parameters and conditions, but when you get seasonal moisture and big growth, the lack of water for 9 months is a real setback. So they have coast redwood trees in here, and I'm okay with alders, intense water-loving plant, prefer western sycamores, which are part of the program too. So in these ways, have my own issues with some of the plant choices. That's part of the history of this campus here. But there is sufficient moisture to hydrate and to sustain a forest of plants, and do think that, yes, summer irrigation is required due to redbud trees or shrubs being included, the heuchera, carex, juncus. These are plants that can harden off, but will slowly decline if you don't provide some summer subsidy. This one image on the right shows our fear of not having water for our landscapes. We have a series of spray irrigation heads at 42 inches on center along the fence line to spray water into some of these plantings. It's done out of concern that we need the water, to fear that the plants that are going to grow are going to block the irrigation heads, which happens all the time, and find that there's no easy answer to that, but it's over-irrigated, and the embodied energy associated with PVC pipe and the manufacture of HDPE poly heads or high-density plastic heads is very intense and could be avoided. But additionally, the zones are separated. They have the wet zone, the dry zone, they have the coast live oaks, and they have sage and chaparral species defining the perimeter. And there's nice zonation of the plants and intent to work with indigenous or locally adapted native species. To saying we see lots of good examples, and I look for these creative ideas here and there. We go down to the University of California Cooperative Extension, demonstration plantings down in Irvine, and they have these demonstration plantings around 3 different homes. Really like the idea of how you were able to take your driveway and to saw cut and remove bands out of it, put in crushed rock, drain line, patch it in with a decorative stone or brick, and allow water to infiltrate at that point, go into the gravel, into the perforated pipe, and then to flow into the landscape off to one side or the other. Really clever, aesthetic, simple solution for a common challenge in so many of our residential areas. And they've tried a lot of things here. They're testing that vast asphalt parking lot that produces a lot of runoff. They do recognize the need to filter at least a particulate matter out of the water as it comes into this impoundment zone, and have been advocates of wonderful plants like the buffalo grass, the Vista Verde, or UC Verde cultivar that I'm seeing grown in fairly shaded locations, mowed less frequently, and having really good application aesthetically, if not functionally, in residential to commercial scale projects. And I'm just thrilled that the latest iteration of the state model water conservation ordinance is mandating the inclusion of meters or sub-meters for landscape water use. We are so in the dark. Going back 1976 when we had our first drought cycle and asked how much water we're using, and then 1984, and then 1992, 98, we have not made any progress in understanding how much water our landscapes use. We use calculations, we use smart controllers. We're still lacking hugely in this regard, and say step number 1 of any irrigation system is to put a sub-meter in, and at least know what your project is doing or any other that you're involved in. So I have summary recommendations here. And believe it or not, first of all, is to estimate all the embodied energy costs that go into our landscapes. That's correlated to the carbon footprint. And when the carbon footprint is out of balance, everything from the sustainability of the garden to the health and to our enjoyment of it, I think, is out of balance. When we have a positive relationship, we're really in the winner's circle in a lot of ways. And so I look at that, and the association with the discussion today and rainwater capture is to say that the way that we collect, transport, disperse, and use water in our landscapes uses more energy than anything else in the state of California and has the greatest carbon footprint of any of our energy activities. And our landscapes do not survive the water energy carbon issue, let alone all the other embodied energy associated with our landscapes. Estimate the long-term standing biomass of the landscape. Every pound of plants that we grow sequesters a half pound of carbon. It releases a pound of oxygen into the atmosphere. And for those of you who want to make it really personal, 1 pound of biomass sustains or contains about 2,000 kilocalories of food energy, and that's the amount of energy we each need each day of our lives. And so that 1 pound of biomass translates into these wonderful metrics to understand the benefit of our landscapes. So let's start not only measuring our water use, let's start estimating and understanding the carbon sequestration of the biomass of the landscapes we're achieving here. When it comes to the water itself, test and manage, filter the water. We need to make sure it's good water for our landscapes. When it comes down to the plants, small plants, diverse plants, plants that fit the region, fit the area, embrace the California experience, things of that guideline. Plant late fall through winter, prehydrate, install small plant sizes, top dress soils with mulch, both organic and inorganic. You know all of this, and I'm just listing it again. It's not a complete checklist, but it does all weigh in on the idea of using rainwater, bring it into our landscapes, and having it have as much benefit as possible. There's also a lot of maintenance to do here, and know that if anything, like energy in buildings, the energy to construct Kellogg West is huge. The carbon footprint was phenomenal, and it's dwarfed by the power to run the lights, provide the water, service the building for the next 50 years. And we've learned that we have to look at maintenance as the place that everything is escaping our attention at times. So the last garden here is an answer to Mike, or like to acknowledge again, having done a few landscape designs in my practice, I still enjoy some of them more than others, particularly in this case when the couple said, right in the middle of Claremont, with all these lawns and wonderful landscapes on either side, we want to go all native, and we want to go really dry. And in that way, we're able to convert a small residential property into a garden that has the diversity that I feel is appropriate. Definitely demonstrates the color, needs shade from built structures and other things due to the heat and intensity of sunlight, but also accommodates the seasonal flow of water off the roof and through the garden, and which led to the development of a simple meander through the garden where both pathways could cross over and seating areas could be arranged around, and that could withstand the flow of moisture on the periodic rains that we get here just fine, and have discovered that, hey, white sage, black sage, Dudleya, mimulus, they love the water. There are sage scrub washes off all of our inland mountains and foothills with a lot of gravel and stone and fast drainage, which this site has. And water can flow over these plants around them, inundate them, and the next day the sun's out and the plants are washed and they're just beaming with the potential to grow. And would say additionally in this, we crafted this meander through the garden to take water off patios and roofs and to stretch it out, to infiltrate it, had little basins along the way and a terminal area. We had boulders, we had cobble, we had crushed gravel, pea gravel, decomposed granite, sand. You know, we got out there with all of our skill and moved things around, shaped what you see here, and finally got really tired and finished the job. And the first rain came, and the flow of water rushed through this design, and it settled all of the little gravel, all the pea gravel, all the DG, all the sand into the most wonderful natural positioning that we could not even begin to achieve. We tried it with rakes, we tried it with brooms, we tried it with hoses, and just the flow of water made what I think was a good idea a piece of art. Thank you very much.
Okay, we're going to take a 10-minute break here before Wendy comes on. Before we do, I just want to let everybody know that this event is being videotaped and it will be on the CANGC website in the end of February. So if you're not taking notes, you can watch it again. So we will resume at 3:30. Okay, our next speaker is a CalPoly graduate from the right CalPoly, she says, which that would be, which CalPoly would that be? Pomona? Pomona! Wendy Proud is a rep for Mountain States Wholesale Nursery in Arizona. She worked for Monrovia for 10 years as a grower. Past president of LA chapter of CAN, and she actually strong-armed me into becoming president right afterwards. And for 2 years, and I think I was president until the whole thing folded. And she says she's worked about every job in the nursery industry. So if that doesn't qualify as an expert, I don't know what is. So please welcome Wendy Proud from Mountain States Wholesale Nursery.
Hi everyone. How are you guys feeling? Pretty pumped up after all this good stuff you're hearing? Yeah? Okay, good. That's what I like to hear. So how many of you think this is a really exciting time in our industry? You better all be raising your hands, because I'm imagining that everybody in here has seen an uptick in their business since this whole drought business kind of started, right? Yes. Okay? And you're all here for a reason. You're all here because you want to learn new things, kind of what's happening, what's going on. Well, the reality is, and you heard Bob and you heard Mike say it, the drought's not going away, folks. It's here, and things have changed, and we're going to be looking at this for a number of years to come, which is great. Who would have thought that the drought honestly could kind of save all of us, right? I mean, this industry, what was the most exciting thing that had happened before the drought? Changing to plastic cans? I mean, seriously. We had kind of gotten in a rut a little bit, if you will, saying, oh, we live in the land of plenty. Bring in this plant from there and this plant from here, and we can grow it all. This is everything you ever wanted it to be. But now we're being asked. The drought has actually asked us to say, hey, us and the public, what are we doing with our landscapes? What do we believe in anymore? What's more important now? And it's really asking us to change our beliefs and our habits. And I don't know about the rest of you, but when I go out to nurseries, I get this a lot from people. Well, I used to. I'm not ready to talk drought-tolerant plants. I don't believe it's coming. You don't believe it's coming? What are you talking about? It's been here for a long time. What are you going to believe? So the title that Jean and I came up with is Time to Consider Your Options. And I think you've heard some of those today about different choices that we're being forced to ask ourselves, and that we're having to kind of turn around back to our clients, our customers, the different people who are employing us. And we're having to be the professionals. We're the ones, as we should be, and we're the ones who are the ones to be looked at for the answers, for the solutions. So it's really our time as part of this industry to share with people what the options are, to let them know we can move forward in a positive way, we can have a beautiful landscape, we can have gardens that we can interact with and be a part of, we can invite nature, all of these things, but we're going to have to change our ways a little bit. And change is scary, we all know that. But if we all work together, I feel that we can really make the most of it and really make it a positive thing. So we know this, first of all, don't doubt the drought, right? We've all seen signs like this. I travel the whole state of California on a pretty regular basis, and so I'm always captivated by some of the signs and the warnings that people see or have out there. Cut your irrigation in half. How many of you believe that that's probably likely to be true if you were doing conventional landscaping with all the plants that love water and your regular irrigation and you got it running 3 days a week and all these sorts of things? This is probably a really true statement, especially as Bob noted in his quantitative evaluation of water and how much water really takes. Thanks, Bob, for the segue, by the way, with the Mountain States plants on the Moreno Valley median. That was an interesting project for me to see because I haven't gone back and revisited since that had been planted. So that was really interesting for me to see. Now I want to go out there and check it out. We see all kinds of positive, proactive things that different water agencies, cities, everybody that you can think of is using to try and help people realize that this isn't going to go away. This is real. So I thought this was interesting. This is the first one I'd seen on a bus stop. I was in Palm Springs when I saw this, so I thought that was pretty interesting. And then this one here in my town, where I live, in San Marcos in San Diego County, turf irrigation halted during drought restrictions. How many of you have seen signs like this? Lots of cities are putting this up. Do you know why? Because they're getting inundated with questions. Inundated. Why is the grass brown at City Hall? Why is the grass brown here? You'd think people were living under rocks and they didn't even understand what was really going on. But unfortunately, we had to put signs out like this to explain to people why our aesthetic that we're so used to is changing all of a sudden. It's almost like we have to give like a I'm sorry. We shouldn't be giving I'm sorry. We should be saying, how can I help, is what we should be doing. And we're seeing things like this, conserving our water supply. I can't really read that too much, but it's basically, this is in the same shopping center or very close to the town center where that last slide was taken. And this is a little planter space that used to be annuals when I moved in 9 years ago to San Diego, North County, San Diego. I can't tell you how happy I was the day I saw them put Dazzler and Wheeler in there. I about jumped out of my skin. I was so excited. I was like, yes, finally, they're getting it, you know? And we mixed in a little bit of succulents, not the 10 random succulents, Mike, with the mulch floating in a sea of mulch, but they honestly tried to put a few things together and make it creative. Again, though, we're apologizing or explaining. These plants are beautiful. It's just becoming attuned to a new aesthetic, basically. So I still run into nurseries and places where they say, we're not going to worry about taking out that turf or changing the landscape or anything because it's going to rain again and it'll all be fixed. How many of you believe when it rains again it's all going to be fixed? Okay, good answer. Okay, so the other option is we need to start to play along, as we're here, I believe everyone here is doing this. We need to follow through with the changes that are being mandated by the state and local water agencies and see how we can turn what appears to be a negative, because in the beginning, if you all remember, when the drought was first being talked about, everybody was in crisis in this industry. What are we going to do? How are we going to stay in business? Nobody's going to plant plants anymore. They're just going to put rock out. What are we going to do? And we all got a little panicky. And there really was no reason to get panicky. It was just to kind of suck it up and raise the bar and say, hey, you know what? We can do this. And especially together, we can definitely do this and make it a positive. So for me, I'm here to talk a little bit about not only do you have options in terms of plant material that you can choose, which are plentiful now, like they never have been before, but you can also be a leader. You can be somebody who says, You know what? I can be somebody who can help you. Or if I can't help you, I can help you find the people who can. So for me, the positives far outweigh the negatives that some people want us to believe. So let's talk about, first of all, we're talking about water, okay? Water is the most precious resource that we've deemed that we have. We all need it, plants need it, everything living needs water, basically. But there's some different things that we can do to help kind of move forward in this idea. First of all, if we pick regionally appropriate plants that are in tune with our gardens here, it just makes more sense, right? Okay, they work with our patterns of rainfall, they work with our soils. Things don't need to be modified or changed to the degree where it's almost an artificial environment, if you will. Mike and Bob both talked about this and how if we work with the nature the regional nature that we have here, or wherever you are, you'll find that everything works a little bit better. Your carbon footprint is a lot less. You're not, doing as much fertilizing, watering, pruning, all of these things. If we let nature kind of be a little bit more of what nature really has the magical potential to be, that's when we really see what we can do with things. This is a really interesting picture. This is from a famous landscape architect named Christy Tenike. She was in Arizona for many years, and now she's moved on to Texas. The next few images that I'm going to share with you, and I'm going to talk about some of these positives that I was mentioning. These slides are meant to kind of get you to think a little bit about the possibilities of things. Not maybe all of them would be in tune with what you might like to do or think is great. And we're not judging. It's simply to get your mind being a little bit more creative to the fact that there is no one set visual anymore. The visual now becomes more internal, and that is what works in combination and in synergy with the local environment, and will require the least amount of touches, water, and all of these other things from us, or resources in general. So this is a landscape that is in Texas, and what I think is interesting about this is that she had a very wooded property, and what she's done is she's converting it over to a little bit more of a landscape style that she's accustomed to, but she's blended it in very well, I felt, with the natural surrounding that she was given to start with. And this is more about what I'm talking about in terms of blending with those sorts of things, not to take it over, not to denude it, not to say, let's start over, reset button, but to work with it and to learn how we can kind of have this new aesthetic evolve, which I think is really exciting. We've yet to see what that is. I think we're starting to see little snippets of it here and there, but Mike kind of alluded to it. There's not a lot of good ones out there yet necessarily, whether you're judging or not, there's not a lot of good ones. So this one's really neat. She did use a lot of Mountain States plants, I will mention, but they're plants that are regionally appropriate to Texas where she is now, so it makes sense. Here's a shopping center some of you may or may not be familiar with. This is down in Huntington Beach. I can't even remember the name of it. It's a little designer area where they have different furniture, Soho, I think it's Soho, yeah. And this is a little bit more in kind of line with what Mike was talking about with all the succulents and this, but they've added in some architectural elements too, some palms and some aloes and some grasses and things like this. So they're attempting to make it a little more exciting than just all succulents. So we have an ability as professionals to help and find and offer solutions with some of these new issues that we're dealing with. So one of the issues I see is that there is this kind of craze in that we create landscapes that are all succulents. Okay, that's great for some landscapes, but it's not very dynamic. If you can have landscapes that have different structural, elements to it, they can have soft touches of grasses, rambling ground covers, maybe a hard element like a rock or a bench or something like that. That's when you really start to talk about a garden. And remember that some of these places, like here, these are planter spaces. They're not really necessarily meant to be interacted with as much, but they're very close in proximity to people every day. So you have to think about how they involve that. Looking at this landscape, first thing I would have probably done is done something that brought in a few more hummingbirds or birds or things like that. Something, again, to make it more interactive with people. a lot of the items that are in there don't look like they'll invite a lot of pollinators or anything like that necessarily. Here's another planter that is in the same shopping center. This is at, I think this was at Village Green or something green. I can't remember what the name of the store was that used to be here. But this is a little bit more what we're talking about. It's got some interactive. You can come in here and sit. You know, maybe you could get some birds sitting in the trees and things. But again, it's still kind of stale. It could use a little bit more to kind of make it more exciting. This actually is my garden. So you can laugh. You can say, great. But I wanted to show you my front yard because this is a landscape that has no irrigation at all. Okay? I took this during the heat of summer on purpose. It had not been irrigated except for the random storm that we got in August, I think it was, that actually brought us quite a bit of rain, a lot of rain. But for this landscape, there's a lot of things in here that are Mountain States plants, but there's also a lot of other things as well. The idea is that they all work together and they change seasonally, they're dynamic, there's something always going on in this garden, which for me is great. And I travel a lot, so I don't want to be a slave to my garden. I want it to be something I can come home and enjoy, and if I want to pick at it or sit out here or whatever, I can. But the idea here is that we provide ongoing support to people to give them through the sharing of knowledge and information and working with people so that we can constantly be updating our skills, updating our ideas, our philosophies of different things. And we really need to be sharing this information with one another more often than not than we are now. I'll give you a little story of that too. So this is, I believe this is Woodillia trilobata, which is kind of a very aggressive brown cover, but simply put in here with Yucca rostratas. I think these Yucca rostratas originally came from Mountain States perhaps, but I thought it was very interesting what they did with the skirts on these. It's kind of fun, kind of whimsical. Again, a different idea, a different approach. Very simple, very clean. Works very well for this space. Now, this one has some shadows in it the day that I took the picture. So this is a landscape that maybe some of you would say, not really what I had in mind, but for some, this is ideal. Maybe their situation, maybe this is what they were looking for. So we're going to see a lot of things come out of this new idea of less is more, lower your water use. Sometimes it can be taken to the extreme. I will say that for one thing, that these plants that they've chosen here, I've watched them for many months now. This has been in for about a year. It's a southwest exposure, extremely hot. All of the rock and everything makes it even more so. And these plants are actually doing really well. So they've chosen the right plants. I'm going to give them that, that they've definitely held up to what the environment they were put in. And then we see things like this now, small planters, medians of different sorts that are, this was taken during the winter time, so, but it's plants that are looking a little bit more, late summer. These are plants that we're seeing in combination with one another now more often, succulents and dazzlerians and grasses and things like this. This used to be turf. This is far more dynamic than turf and definitely more interesting to look at. So I want to share a story real quick about two nurseries. And it makes sense because it's the type of thing where I'm talking about how we all need to continue to work together because we're not out of the woods. And if you think you have all the answers, you don't. I don't. Bob doesn't. Mike doesn't. None of us do. We all have to collectively continue to work together, and that's what's really going to make our industry stronger. So when I started out with Mountain States 6 years ago, I didn't know as many people as I know now in this industry because I've traveled all around and I've cold called a lot of people and I've talked to a lot of people. There's two nurseries. One, he's actually a broker. I'm going to leave names out. One's a broker and one's a nursery in Riverside. The other day I had a situation where I called and the gentleman in the broker called me and he said, I have 501 gallons and I need to get up to Santa Clarita. And I said, okay. And that's not a minimum order for Mountain States. And I said, okay, that's not really a minimum order, but I'll see what I can do for you. I said, the only thing I could possibly do is put you on a truck that's going to LA, but right now I have a Riverside guy paired up with that, and if I pull my Riverside guy off, that's not fair, and then he's not going to go anywhere, but your LA truck will go. Most people would have said, I don't care about the Riverside guy, whatever. I want my load to go, right? he said, okay, he says, what do I need to do? And I said, I need your help. Who in Riverside do you know that you can help me ask to fill out this Riverside truck so I don't leave him behind? He said, I'll make a phone call. He called me back 5 minutes later. He said, call this guy in Riverside. I knew who it was, very friendly with him, understand one another. Called him up. He said, okay, I'm going to send you an order, and we'll make that Riverside truck go so my LA friend can go too. That is unheard of. That is fantastic. That working together, that synergy. Now, it worked out, of course, but just in the past to have had nurseries that would talk like that with one another, or people who would work like that together, that's an example of where we need to be. That's where we need to be going. And some of you may not be into that, and some of you may, but that really is honestly the kind of collaboration that will really move us farther as an industry. So I hope that proves to be some sort of an example for you. This here is a project that we worked on, Cache Creek Casino up in Sacramento. This is outside of Sacramento, actually outside of UC Davis. And this was it's a casino that had a lot of turf that needed to be converted. They were looking to go this way for quite a while. They did hire a landscape architect who has helped them. And since then, I've gone on to help them quite a bit as well with design and everything. So this is Muhlenbergia dubia being used in replacement for traditional turf. It is pruned once a year. When do warm season grasses get pruned? Quiz. In the spring, in the beginning of the warm season. Really important because if you prune warm season grasses at the beginning of winter, first of all, they look really ugly, and you've taken a lot of their protective covering and ability to kind of build up strength through the winter and store energy through the winter. And then when you prune them in the spring, then you have the growth that comes out, and you don't have these little nubs that you're looking at all winter. So just a little quick note there. Prune your warm season grasses in the spring. This was another planter that was planted. This was kind of just weeds and such. It really wasn't anything. This is not Mexican feathergrass. This is its wonderful replacement and appropriate plant for California, Aristida purpurea, the purple 3-on grass. Looks almost identical. Purple 3-on grass, Aristida purpurea. I'm going to say it again. Stay away from that Mexican feathergrass. This is Yucca pallida, which is another fantastic plant that I'll highlight. But these are ideas of some of the things that what you can do now with these planters, with these spaces that have been turf in the past, for example, because we pick on turf a lot and do turf conversion. This was a little planter that was outside of their mini mart area. This was a boxwood hedge that was classic for collecting cans, cigarette butts, leftover coffee from 2 days ago in the car, these sorts of things. It was a disaster. The windows always had like spills all over them on the inside, and it was just so disgusting. So they said, can we change this? So we completely tore it out and put in some different plants that will give them different things throughout the year. Aloe, Bouteloua, Guan ambition, a little Anthera, another yucca, some different things that make it very dynamic. What's interesting is there's no trash and no cigarette butts in this planter anymore. People view it as too pretty to throw something nasty into. So it's a mindset. It's changed people's mindset, which was great. Here's the entrance to the planter at Cache Creek Casino. Same thing. This was all turf. This is a sloped median, so you have cars coming in and out of here, people with dollar signs in their eyes. It's time to gamble, not really paying attention to the median and things like that, and the guys mowing on it. They had some issues with that on this median, so they decided, let's convert it. So it's got some cork oaks on it, and then we put in a whole bunch of Hesperaloe, Pink Parade, and Yucca pallida. And this is going to be a phenomenal show when it blooms in the spring and summertime. 3 to 4 foot spikes of straight up pink and straight up white flowers. It's going to stop traffic, I'll tell you right now. This is a really great turf conversion example. I love this image because this is taken from a parking garage. I'm at about 3 stories up at this point. So this planter over here looked exactly like this planter at one point, okay? So it's hard to see, but there are the same pistache trees and everything in there, just like there are on this side. So we converted that side, and it's doing beautifully, and it will blend in with everything else, and now we're looking to do this side. The water savings, I can't even begin to tell you, this has basically been turned off, and this is still going. And this is a lot of issues with liability potential for, this is a very steep slope, guys trying to mow like this, it just doesn't work. So there'll be a huge relief off of their shoulders so that they don't have to be as concerned about people having injuries and things like that. So as I mentioned before, commonly if we all work together, we can kind of move forward in these ways. This project here has taken a lot of different people's input, a lot of back and forth for it to get to this point. Had he tried to do it all on his own, it would never have turned out the way that it did. So he's very thankful, I'm very thankful. The tribes members that are there, that are overseeing the casino and everything, they're very thankful because they think aesthetically it looks better too. It blends in better with the surrounding environment. So we are all connected to the earth, and we basically, we don't really honor that connection enough, I don't feel. Mike talked about how little we get outside as people. How many of you got into this business because you like being outside? You enjoy plants, you enjoy nature. How many of you got it just for the cold hard cash? Oh, see? I'm still waiting to find those people in this industry. No, I'm in good company that you all love that. And that goes along right with this man's belief. This is Ron Gass. Ron Gass is the owner and founder. Him and his wife, Maureen, founded Mountain States Nursery. I'm going to talk a little bit about some different things now and how Mountain States fits in. And first of all, I have to tell you about this gentleman. So I think you can tell just by looking at him, he's a pretty happy guy. And he's like this all the time. 365, I've never seen Ron Gass without a smile on his face. He wanted to have his picture taken in that agave. Why? Because he loves those agaves, and he just loves the desert Southwest. He started his business almost 50 years ago, and has been doing it ever since with just the biggest smile. He is focused on protecting, preserving, and promoting the flora of the desert Southwest. He would be considered, in my opinion, a pioneer of drought or desert adaptive plants. So Mountain States is a company that has been around since 1969. We've led the way in developing and growing plants that belong to the deserts of the Southwest. They're water efficient, adapted to our soil, sun, wind, and all of the conditions that the Southwest brings. They have a fascinating, unique beauty that the Southwest deserts have, and we bring this into our desert, into our neighborhoods, communities, and our homes. We have 3 nurseries. We have a wide range of plants. All of them that we offer, well, about 99% of them are considered very drought tolerant or low water use. We do everything from a 1-gallon perennial little ground cover all the way up to a 24-inch box tree. We used to do bigger plants, but we've since decided that we needed to be able to have more plants available because of the growing demand for plant material instead of focusing on just a few 36-inch boxes. We have an amazing passion for what we do. The people of Mountain States, there's a few of us, not very many at all. There's only 4 reps, maybe 10 people collectively inside the office total. And then outside at the nursery, there's probably about another 70 people. So we're under 100 people, and the nursery operates on we have about 800 acres combined total that we operate off of. One of our main things is that we want to provide customer service, great customer service, exceptional plants, and also keep you committed to what we believe in, and that's education, research and development, and finding new plants that are always going to be coming down the pike. It's just, you've got to find people who are willing to search them out and find them and bring them to market. So here's a couple of we have 2 nurseries in our North Phoenix location, west of Phoenix, I should say. The Luke Nursery is the main nursery, 200 acres, and then we have the Glendale Nursery, which is about 35 acres. We're really no longer there. We've really actually moved everything over to the Luke Nursery. We've recently built a new building too, a new office. So Mountain States is very similar in many ways to many other nurseries. We have, the same type of setup. Our beds run, back and forth, and we have drip, and we do a lot of different varieties, and we have crews that go out and space and can and tie and load trucks and do all these same things that all these other nurseries do. Here's pictures of the 200-acre facility. Doesn't look too different, right, than most nurseries. Looks pretty similar. We have a canning machine, one canning machine. It breaks down just like everybody else's canning machine and causes you headaches. Costs you $10,000 at a whack, and you're like, oh, okay, we got to pay the $10,000 and get the part or whatever. And we have greenhouses. We have 10 acres of greenhouses on the 200-acre property that is in what we call the Luke Nursery. And the Luke Nursery is referred to as that because we're right next to Luke Air Force Base. We actually own the property that is the crash zone. So that's always kind of funny, but I guess it wouldn't be so funny if you were in the crash zone that day their plane crashed. But flying F-16s and F-35s all day gets a little in the ears, let me tell you. This here is one of our greenhouses. It's a 10-acre range that we have. We're very simple in the way we do it. It's just double poly, and then we just add sides and drop it down and cover up with gravel for about 3 months during the wintertime. There's no heating or cooling in this. Everything at Mountain States is exposed to the elements for the most part all year round. Temperatures can range from 25 degrees up to the neighborhood of 115 to 116, something like that typically. We have our little propagation houses like this where we put out liners and seedlings and everything. And we have the famous nursery vehicles that many nurseries have, right? It wouldn't be a good nursery unless you had a nursery vehicle like this. It's built-in air conditioning, we call that in Arizona. But then we're very different in many ways. So I'm here to talk about Mountain States. I'm here to talk to you about the industry, but I'm also here to talk to you about some plants. And plants are really interesting to everyone in this room. And we handle our plants a little bit differently than some. And to me, these are the nurseries that are going to move us forward into the future. I feel very, very fortunate to work for Mountain States. I feel like I've worked my whole career, almost 30 years, to get to this point to work for this company. To me, it's a true honor to work for this company because of the way we look at things. We look at things kind of in an old-fashioned way. We believe in growing plants. Marketing is important, getting them to market is important, but the most important thing is that we grow plants and we grow the right kind of plants, we grow them properly, and that we have enough of them so we don't frustrate people. So these are root maker containers. How many of you have seen root maker containers? Root maker containers are graduated cylinders, basically, or containers that have air slits at the bottom of these, and as they go down in size, the air slits are there, and so as the plant roots root out, they break, and so it forces all the roots to be very fibrous and not have a wrapping, girdling root system. We do this on all of our trees. We do this because we feel it's really important, especially for the landscape areas that our plants are going into. They are mostly going in wind-prone areas, and so by having a nice fibrous root system, we alleviate a lot of the issues with wind throw and things like that, or we can at least help to avoid those things. So we grow plants in containers, but we also grow them in these grow bags. This is a grow bag here that a mesquite was grown into. It's been grown in the ground. The tree itself is about 6 feet tall, and the root container or mass there you see is about 18 inches in diameter. So for a 6-foot tall tree, 18 inches in diameter and only about this tall, maybe a foot tall, that's a pretty small root ball. So that root system is very developed. We'll pull the root bag off, and then we'll put this right into a 24-inch box and root it out from there. Whoops, went the wrong way, sorry. So this here, this tree will be ready in less than 6 months in a 24-inch box from that root maker container for a few reasons. One, trees grow super fast in Arizona because of the heat and the humidity and then the watering that we're doing with them. But then also the root system is so fibrous, it doesn't have to fill in over here and fill in over here. It fills in equally around all the way. Another thing about Mountain States that's very interesting, we exercise an amazing amount of patience. Our patience. Boy, have I learned patience working for this company. These are saguaros, grown from seed that Ron started. And when I first started working there, they looked like this. I don't have a new picture, unfortunately. I got to keep remembering to get one. But when I first started these, and I was asking our grower, I said, "So what's the story with those saguaros?" He says, "Just gonna let them grow." He's like, "Do we irrigate them?" "Nope, just let them grow." Okay. So here I am 6 years later, and these have all like tripled in size. And it's just slow little increments every year, but we exercise a tremendous amount of patience. We also are very innovative. This is our Cochise Nursery. Cochise Nursery is located southeast of Tucson. It's elevated about 4,500 foot elevation. It gets very cold there. We get well below zero. We do get snow, and it doesn't rain a whole lot, maybe 2 to 3 inches naturally per year. It's a beautiful, beautiful, wild place. We have about 400 acres there, and we grow a little over 400 acres, and we have mostly Yucca rostratas, large specimen type items that we grow there. These are Yucca rostratas, and we just furrow, irrigate these, just flood irrigate them in the furrows. This is a very innovative thing, I think, for Mountain States in that we have our own boxes made. These are squatty boxes that we have made for some of our palm trees or palm tree-like plants. This is a Nolina nelsoni. These are 25 to 30-year-old specimens that have 6 to 7 feet of trunk on them typically. They're the type of thing that when you see them for the first time, you run up and you hug them because you just appreciate what they've seen and what they've been through growing in this field down there for so long with very little care. These are Yucca rostratas. Same thing, we grow these in the field, and then we dig them and put them in 20-gallon containers. Another one of the plants that we're noted for having and seem to not ever have enough of, but we're working on these things to make them better as time goes on. Dazzleri and Wheeleri, these are again 30-year-old specimens that have been field grown, dug up, and then we sell them in containers. We sell everything basically in containers, nothing bare root. I should also mention that the predominant focus of our product line is from the Sonoran and the Chihuahuan Desert. We do pull things from other arid regions around the world as well, including Australia, but we really are trying to focus and stay within the realm of the Southwest. That really is kind of our focus. And we have a really unique mix of plants that work well with that work very well with other regionally appropriate plants like natives and Mediterranean plants and other arid zone plants. So Mountain States is kind of a different nursery in that we've taken a lot of the guesswork out of which plants will be the toughest for you. We've really taken time to test things, put them out to different environments, different situations, and see what happens to them. We do currently ship to 9 western states, and we do ship the entire state of California. I'm just curious, how many people are here from Northern California or Bakersfield North? A few of you? Okay, great, okay. So I'm going to blaze through a few trees and some other plants here all categorized out for you so you can kind of see. All of these are on our website as well. We have information sheets for every plant that we grow. Also, I have a card over here on the side that you can all pick up. This has our website on it, tells a little bit more about who we are. If you want to leave this as a calling card for someone who maybe has a not particularly attractive yard or something like that, this is also really nice. It's kind of the subliminal kind of, hey, your yard could use a little improvement. Let me help. Remember what I said? We can all help. So let's talk about some plants. And these are plants that I'm going to tell you some unique things about. I'm going to tell you why they're improvements. And one of the things that Mountain States is really noted for is finding plants or developing plants, sometimes even breeding plants in the case of Ron and his mad scientist that he does, in bringing new plants to market. So we're kind of like the Monrovia of the desert, if you want to look at us that way, and that we are always trying to find new things and really try and make improvements more so than anything. So Chalopsis, how many of you have used Chalopsis before? Anybody? Okay. So the desert willow is a really great adaptive plant. It has the ability to go for long, long periods without water. Is considered more of kind of a riparian tree or a plant that collects and ends up in areas of low-lying areas to collect water, periods of water and monsoon activity, which is the majority of what the Sonoran and the Chihuahuan Desert receives. A large part of their water each year would be during the summer months, actually, not necessarily during the winter. Although this year we're getting a lot more rain in Arizona. Chalopsis art seedless is an improvement, like some others out on the market, but seedless Chalopsis are really great because when they don't produce the seeds, it means that they flower much longer. So they flower for upwards of 6 to 8 months, as opposed to maybe 3 or 4 if they were producing a lot of seed pods. These are the seed pods that I'm talking about, and they manually need to be removed. And if they're not manually removed, your plant stops flowering. So what's nice about this variety as well is that it has a two-tone colored flower, but it naturally kind of has this open, billowy look, which is nice. Now remember, a lot of your desert trees also are great for allowing sunlight to come through. So in smaller spaces, which we're all dealing with more and more, it seems like these days, you can put a little bit more landscape around the tree and in amongst the planter and have a little bit more of a dynamic landscape if you do plant trees that have kind of an open canopy. These get to about 30 by 30, and there's many other varieties on the market that are also seedless, but this is one that we do. Prosopis phoenix, this is our Chilean mesquite that Ron took one extra step in improving. We have it as a hybrid there because it is grafted onto Prosopis juliflora, and Prosopis juliflora is the native Arizona mesquite, which is rock solid and will not blow over. Whereas Chilean mesquites are very weak at rooting and typically get to a really nice kind of semi-mature size, 12, 15, 20 feet, and then you have a rainstorm and then a little wind and then bye-bye mesquite. That's just kind of the way it is. So we fixed that problem by grafting it onto Prosopis juliflora, and so this tree is now rock solid and does not blow down. 30 by 30, beautiful fissured kind of a cinnamon colored bark at maturity. Bright lime green foliage when it first comes out. Again, remember it's thornless, so you don't have to worry about that. Maturing to a dark green foliage, and then deciduous through the winter time. And deciduous trees are great for southern and western exposures, especially because they allow sunlight in, but then give you the coverage through the summertime to cover the house or protect an area where you want to kind of relax. So this is one of those plants, Calliandra Sierra Star, that Mountain States brought to market many, many years ago. We do patent some items, and we do trademark and do a lot of that as well, trademark and register plants. You may or may not agree with that, but plants are big business, and they need to be protected. So from time to time, they do, especially for efforts that are put forth into developing them. Calliandra Sierra Star is a cross between Calliandra californica, which many of you are probably familiar with, and Calliandra eriophila, which is the desert fairy duster, which is a pink. So one's pink, one's kind of an orangey red, and together they make a dynamite, kind of a glowing, flowering plant. Hummingbirds are very attracted to this. They will buzz it all day long. And what's really nice about this plant, even though it can have very small leaves and can look somewhat kind of not as lush maybe as someone might like it to look. It can look a little bit on the sticky side, for lack of a better word. Open branching structure. It does flower for an incredibly long period of time. In fact, in my garden in San Diego, I've maybe seen 2 or 3 times where they haven't had flowers on them. They always have a flower on them. Leucophyllums, we're going to see a lot of leucophyllums come into the landscape here in the coming years. There's a lot of them out there. There's compacta, a lot of frutescens types. Compacta, there's, let's see, green cloud, heavenly cloud, silver cloud. There's all these different ones out there. This is one that I think is particularly noteworthy because it flowers so long. One of the biggest problems that leucophyllums have is that they are dependent upon a humidity change to trigger them to bloom. So if we don't have a humidity change during their bloom cycle, which is May through October, they will not bloom. So in the years past in California, we would have said, you're right, they're not going to bloom because we don't have that monsoon activity. Well, the last few years, we've been getting a lot of that monsoon activity. So these guys go crazy. But if we get back into our regular pattern where we're not having the monsoon come up into Southern California and even go all the way up into the state, then this is the one you definitely want to have in your landscape. And this is Lynn's Legacy. Lynn's Legacy is a Langmaniae species, but what's different about this is that it was sought after to not need that humidity change. So Lynn Lowry, a famous Texas nurseryman who's no longer with us, he was the one who brought this to market or worked to find it. And it will bloom on and off at about a 4 to 6 week interval continuously from May until October. So you don't have to have that humidity change anymore. This one gets about 3 to 4 by 3 to 4. The flowers are very pretty. They're a light color, kind of a lavender. And then the foliage is very identifiable because it's kind of a cupped shape and it's very olive color. Tacomas. There's a lot of new Tacomas coming out on the market. There's 3 of them that are particular noteworthiness for Mountain States. I'm going to go through them kind of quickly. All of them, though, were bred or brought to market with the understanding that they produce far less seed pods. Same thing with the Chalopsis. Fewer seed pods means more flowers. So these are plants that bloom again from during almost their entire bloom cycle, and that's May all the way until October or first frost. What's nice about these is they have a very kind of tropical look to them, even though they're very drought tolerant. Once established, they're very bushy and full, typically give you a bigger look or a bigger footprint in a landscape that is kind of something that people tend to look for, especially if it's a large flowering item. Sierra apricot is one that we came to market with many years ago. This is a 3 to 4 by 3 to 4. It stays very, very small, and it is kind of an apricot color. These all like full, hot, blazing sun, despite you might see them in a little bit of shade. They want the hottest exposure you can provide to them. Southwest, blasting hot, against a building, next to a pool, reflective heat. Any other suggestion, any other idea? I mean, as hot as you can make it. They love it that hot. Hardiness is they're hardy down to about 15 degrees. So if you are in an area where they're kind of marginal, you're going to want to plant them early in the season, like in spring or early summer, to get them established a little bit before we get a big winter hit, and then maybe they freeze to the ground that first year. As subsequent years come on and they build in their strength and their stature and their woody structure, because they will develop a woody structure, they will be more upright and be less subject to cold and frost and things, so they won't burn back as much. But the first year, you really want to make sure you get them in kind of early if you're in an area that does have a fair amount of frost or cold. Crimson Flare was another one we came to market with about 4 years ago. This is an upright red, very free flowering, gets up to about 6 feet or so. This is more of an upright grower. And on the Tacomas, what's nice about these is you only need to prune them to shape, really. Otherwise, I would leave them alone or to build their structure and their shape in the beginning, because they're really going to just keep flowering and flowering and flowering. Anytime you cut off a bunch of flowers, the branch is going to break, and all of those branches are going to have flowers on them, every single one of them. So the breeding in these is really, really good to get a lot of flowers. Solar Flare is our smaller one, bright orange. We did not expect this to do as well as it has. It's probably our #1 seller there now, because we didn't expect orange to be such a hot seller. It typically isn't, but the way this plant flowers and the size of it, which is more 5 by 5, is very, very popular. Here's a great picture that shows you how free flowering these are. They just keep going. They don't stop. Look at these long, long flower spikes. So until you cut them off, they basically don't stop. Here it is in a container. You can see it there. It's getting a lot of hot sun. This was kind of towards the end of the season, and this was more mid-season when the plant was more fresh in a planting in Palm Springs that I saw. Here's a very up-and-coming plant that a lot of people don't know about. Mike, you know about this one. Vauquelinia californica is a plant that I think everybody should be writing down and putting on their radar, no matter who you get it from, which is you can get it from Mike or us or different people. But Vauquelinia californica is the next new upright shrub, in my opinion. You can use this for screening. You can use this for covering up junk very easily. You can see. You didn't even see that, did you? See all that junk that's hiding back there? See how good this plant is at hiding junk? What's nice about this is it's very, very hardy. This was taken at our high elevation nursery, so this property gets to 0, so I don't really care where you are. You're going to be able to have this plant because it's cold enough or cold hardy enough. It does get kind of a burnished color to the foliage during the winter time, kind of a reddish color. You can see it wants to be very upright, so it lends itself well to that. You can hedge it by the top or the sides a little bit if you want to, but it naturally kind of wants to grow like this. It also is a kind of a look-alike to oleander, but yet it's not poisonous in any way, which is nice. And it does not produce any berries like Prunus caroliniana that are #1 toxicity. So these are all things that people look for in hedging material. I did landscaping for a number of years, and these are concerns people have. So to find a plant like this that can really kind of fill all of these things is really unique. And it's very drought tolerant. Also is good for shady situations. So if you have an area where you're backing up to, let's say, some native oaks or something like that, or sycamores, and it's fairly dark, you can put it under there. It will grow, it'll grow slowly, but it will grow and it will stay evergreen all the way to the base. That's really important. It won't get bare legs at the bottom. These are the flowers that it produces in the early summertime. It attracts little bees and butterflies and little pollinators. Kind of has a little bit of a sweet smell to it. Vauquelinia californica. A couple grasses. Grasses are back on the rise, and I am so happy about that because the landscape is really boring without grasses. How many of you like grasses? Everybody like grasses again? Yeah, I know. Sometimes, depending on where you put them, they can peter out and things like that, but grasses are back for sure. Capillaris regal mist, Muhlenbergia. Mountain States grows a lot of different types of Muhlenbergias. They're far hardier in terms of their drought tolerance than things like miscanthus and some of the other grasses that we've been had a love affair with for a long time. Not to say those plants don't have their usefulness in some spaces, but if you want really drought tolerant, something that can really go many months without, and that's going to be some of your Muhlenbergias. Capillaris regal mist, this is the darkest coloring capillaris on the market. It is a variety that gets up to 3 to 4 by 3 to 4. It can get quite large. Regal mist is our registered trademark. We only grow regal mist because capillaris cross-pollinates really easily. So if we were to grow regular capillaris with regal mist, we would soon lose this beautiful color that we've worked so hard to maintain by collecting our own seed and everything. Everybody loves a picture with a dog. Okay, Muhlenbergia dubia. I cannot say enough great things about this grass. I showed it to you in mass plantings here. This is at Cache Creek Casino again. It is a really beautiful grass. It's the half version of Muhlenbergia rigens. And I mean half version in every way. It's half the size. Flowers are the same and everything, but it's just a smaller footprint. It's much nicer, especially if for your sight lines. I drive a very low car, and so if I had rigens on a median or something like that, and I was trying to look around or see in front of, I wouldn't be able to. It'd be too tall. So this grass is more appropriate, especially for uses in medians and things like that, where your sight line might be a little bit lower or should be lower. This grass, I absolutely love it. The more I see it used, the more I love it. And the feedback on it is that people are really enjoying it more. Also, I think because it's smaller footprint, it tends to, or because it doesn't get so big, it tends to not get so thatchy in the center like rigens does. Rigens almost kind of predetermines its own demise if it's not maintained properly in some cases. This is Muhlenbergia immersa el Toro. This is another selection that Mountain States made. This is the color of the flowers when they first come out. They're kind of a pink color, and then they go to a buff color when they're mature, but the overall plant is only about 2.5 to 3 feet tall with flowers, which is very nice. All of these Muhlenbergias do go dormant during the winter, so you can expect a wintry look with them or a golden look with them. Bouteloua Blonde Ambition. How many people have used this grass so far? Does everybody like it for the most part? Okay. This is a plant that's going to be very, very popular. There's a lot of people growing it now. It definitely has a lot of usefulness. It's something that's got a lot of show quality to it. The flowers on it have an amazing, when the backlight comes through it, I think this is probably the way that it's best used in order to see the backlight coming through the flowers. This one is one that gets up to 2 to 3 by 2 to 3. It is a selection off of Gracilis, straight Bouteloua Gracilis. And the improvement on this, or the reason it was selected and patented, is because these eyelashes, as referred to, the eyelashes are so large, come off at a 90-degree angle, and they also flutter in the wind, which is really nice. So they have a lot of movement. The flowers will come on usually in March or April, and they will go all the way until fall. And then what's really nice is they hold through the entire winter. So this being another warm season grass, what's nice about that is you can see that it has a very beautiful look for it through the winter too. How many of you are getting kind of feedback from clients about grasses and they don't want to look at them through the winter, or maybe they're starting to be okay with it? How many are starting to be okay with grasses and leaving them up, sort of, kind of? I think there's going to be a new awareness, kind of a new aesthetic, again, that evolves out of this new landscape that we're creating, the changing landscape that we're creating. What I always find fascinating about this is that people have an adversity to a grass that is colored like this, but yet they'll look on the hills and they'll say, oh, look at the beautiful hills of California, the beautiful golden hills of California. It's the same thing, it's just bigger. You're just bringing it into your space. So I don't understand what the disconnect is. Hopefully this will keep it going. Okay, a few more accent plants. Jean, am I doing okay? I'm wrapping it up. Okay, so Hesperaloe brake lights. This was one of Ron's introductions several years ago. This was a Hesperaloe that was cross-pollinated with other parvifloras, just crossing parviflora back and forth several times until he got what he was looking for, which was the first true red flowering Hesperaloe. Regular Hesperaloe parviflora can vary quite a bit in color range. So you have, this would be maybe a typical seedling, and then this would be the brake lights. So there's a lot of variability in the straight seedlings. They've improved over the years. There's some selections that have been made, or a truer seed in terms of more of a red color or overall size, but it was very variable there for a long time, where you get big plants, little plants, light color, dark color. So Ron wanted to have something that was a little bit more even, something that you could depend on and have a nice red color. So he worked for, I think it was about 13 years to bring brake lights to market. We produce it by tissue culture. Whoops. We produce it by tissue culture, and it only gets up to about, the plant only gets to about 2 by 2, and then the flower spikes come up to about 3 feet or so. What's really nice is that the flowers last for upwards of 6 months in the landscape, which is not something we kind of figured would happen, but it's really nice. And the plants are actually, they start flowering in October in the low desert, and then they bloom all the way until June. Here they would start more in March and go typically till sometime in August. Another one of Ron's, I call them the mad scientist plants, because he gets out there and plays around with these plants for years on end. Pink Parade was one that took him 10 years to bring to market. Hesperaloes, Ron is very intrigued with. I see them as his legacy plants. And this one to me was, I think it's better than brake lights personally, just because of what it can do in a landscape. It has so much pizzazz. So this is a plant that was crossed with, it's funifera, which is a giant Hesperaloe, which is 5 by 5 in its plant, and then the spike is 12 to 15 feet tall, and it's white. He crossed that with regular parviflora to get Pink Parade. So these are 6-foot pink flower spikes. The plant itself will get to be 4 by 4. It'll get to be a clump. And then as it has new fans or new shoots that come out of the plant and it gains its mass, you will get more spikes of flowers. So you'll end up with this 7-gallon plants, for example, are spiking 2 to 3 spikes right now. Imagine what you get on a plant that's like this down the road. 10, 12, 15 spikes. The thing that Ron did that was really interesting about this plant, it has a nice kind of opalescence in the center there, which I think is really pretty. The thing that he really did that was really interesting, because Ron, again, is kind of obsessed with Hesperaloes, and he doesn't want Hesperaloes, he doesn't want his Hesperaloes to track the sun. They're notorious for tracking the sun. The flowers will be just laying down and going like this across the horizon. That doesn't work very good when you have pathways and things where people are trying to use these plants. So he bred into this plant that every single spike would stay straight up. Wasn't that fantastic? That's the kind of breeding that we need moving forward to help us with these situations where we're having these skinny planters, or maybe at that chevron, for example, Bob, where it had that sort of thing. You could plant them in there and they would all stay straight up and be like little soldiers. And kids wouldn't necessarily maybe be tempted to break them off as much because they're not laying in the sidewalk. I mean, they're just being kids, I get it. But this was great because they're all straight up now, and now they can be used against walls and pathways and that sort of thing. Here's something we didn't expect. You've got a Formium look-alike with incredible drought tolerance. Hesperaloes can be left for dead in many cases, and you can come back and they'll still be alive and happy after long, long periods with no water. But what's nice about this one is it actually will take on a reddish cast during periods of drought and cold. So we see this more in cold situations, but I did a little test in my garden in San Diego where I just stopped watering them for about 4 months, and they turned pink in the fall. And we didn't even have any cold at that point. So you can drought stress them to the point where they will turn pink. Cacti. Ooh, cacti are coming back. Yay! People are asking for cacti again, which is exciting. Here's one to have on your radar, Opuntia elysiana. What's nice about this one, no glochids, no spines, nothing at all, completely friendly. You know how you get those little annoying little hairs in your fingers, in your hands, and have to take it out with duct tape or whatever? Not on this one, there's nothing, absolutely clean. Beautiful yellow flower, nice big red fruits on it that are edible, and this plant will get up to about 4 to 5 by 4 to 5. Yucca pallida. Yucca pallida is a, not your old-time yucca. This is a basal clumping yucca. Will never develop a trunk. Gets to about 2 by 2, maybe 2 by 3. And so what will happen is this plant will always be this kind of rosette, and you'll get all these new spikes coming out. It's the same kind of idea with the Hesperalla. The bigger the rosette, the more spikes you get. And this will happen in early spring, or sorry, late spring, early summer. And all you really have to do in terms of maintenance on this one is cut off the flower spike. I'm saying this is the next agapanthus, right? I mean, putting it on medians and things like that where you don't want to touch things. It only needs probably 1 touch a year, honestly, to cut off those flower spikes, and there might be a couple of dead leaves at the bottom, but that's it. Also, the beautiful white flowers are edible, which is nice. Here's Yucca pallida in the landscape at Cache Creek, sending up its big pink spikes. The sheaths on the flower spikes are pink to start with, and then they open to white. This one is pointy to the touch, I will tell you. Those Hesperallos, not pointy to the touch, not sharp, won't poke your eye out, anything of that nature. I have 2 ground covers to share, and then I'm done. This is a ground cover that should be on everybody's radar. We are working so hard to build this one up because we know how popular it's going to be, but it's a little bit difficult to propagate. Dahlia capitata, Sierra Gold, is a low-growing ground cover that has texture unlike any plant you have ever seen. If you have not experienced a dahlia and its soft, ferny texture, it will be something that you'll like, I promise. It's a very dainty but very tough plant. And the look of it here, you would think that there's a gazillion of them in here, but it's not. They're very billowy in the way they grow, and they only get up to about 6 inches tall. This plant here is in my garden, cascading out onto my sidewalk. And this has, there's 1 plant for this entire plant that you see here. That's just 1. So each one fills out to about 4 by 4, kind of, you know, in diameter, but again, only growing to about 6 inches tall. Kind of rambles over rocks and things, will reroot a little bit as it goes. It has a very lemony scent to the foliage, as do all dahlias, and for some reason the little bunnies don't like that, so they stay away. Yay, keep the bunnies away. For those who have bunny trouble, they are the new deer. And then you can see here it has nice little yellow kind of pea-shaped flowers that sit up above the foliage. I will tell you, if you have an aversion to bees, or anybody does, stay away from this one. It is a major bee attractor. Major, major, major. Which is good, but if somebody's adverse to bees. Okay, and here's another ground cover, because I think this is the one category of plant material that we don't have enough of in our industry, and that is great ground covers. We also have to stop being obsessed with every inch of soil has to be covered. Does anybody agree with me on that? It's funny, I talk to people and they say, oh, you're from Arizona. We don't want the landscape to look like Arizona. That's great. I don't want to make it look like Arizona either. I don't want it to look like Arizona. I live in California. We have something new going on here. But we are obsessed with covering every square inch of soil. And we really got to get over that. We've got to look to other alternatives. Colored mulches, rocks, free space, open space. Who would have thought there's like free space for your eye to rest or to collect what it's really looking at around it, things like that. So again, we have the opportunity to really change some people's minds and help us kind of move forward in a different way. Ermophila glabra Minjanoo Gold, this is a really great ground cover that is out there and available. We are not the only ones growing it. It also goes by, I think, Outback Sunrise is the other name. This is a evergreen ground cover that is a great replacement for Myoporum. If you're having trouble with your Myoporum, it almost looks identical to it in terms of the foliage. And in some cases, some HOAs have bought it from me and put it in and not even said anything and just wait for it to fill in and say, oh, look at how great it looks. And now it's flowering yellow. I don't even know how they're going to get away with that. But Minjanoo Gold is a really great one because it is nice and evergreen. It will recover from being broken pretty quickly. It does sprout real easily. It does not root as it goes along, which is nice, especially if you're trying to keep, you know, something kind of contained to a smaller space. And it's just a really nice Australian native that blooms for upwards of 6 months. It seems to be very resilient to low water, higher amounts of water. It'll kind of take whatever you give it, but it definitely does well with low water as well, definitely. Here it is, just green, same planter that I showed you before with, here's what it looks like with all the flowers, and this is the same planter. That's during the probably springtime, and there it was in the summer or in the winter. And so, what's that? Growing under eucalyptus, yes, good point. So there's lots we have to do as a group, as an industry. All of you in this room, all of your friends, all of us combined are what is going to move this forward, this kind of positive thing that we've been given. Our industry's been kind of dumped in our laps and said, hey, can you guys handle this? Can you help us and help make, you know, make this not such a hard transition for everyone? And I ask you all to join me in this kind of journey that we're all on to be the professionals that stand up and say, hey, you know what, we can help. And I'll help you, and I'll help you, and I'll help my friends as well as I go along, because we're all in it together. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Wendy, so much. Let's see, I want to thank Mike Evans for Tree Life Nursery reminding us that the gardens need to tell a story, right? I think that's important. And Bob Perry, CalPoly, reminding us that how to use water naturally occurring water, and to apply it to the gardens that we grow. And of course, Wendy with the, I always like plants. Plants are always great. You never hear enough about them, and making sure they're regionally appropriate for what they're doing. There's a gentleman from CFA, Namol, is back in the, well, he was back in the corner. His stuff is right there in regards to ACP and HLB information. Remind you also that the Nursery Growers Association is putting on a dinner this evening. Cocktails are at 5:30, cocktail hour, and then there's dinner. The program is Economic Outlook for 2016. You're welcome to look at that. And the video will be available by the end of February. I've been told that we'll get it all online by then. And a big thank you for Jean for putting it all together. Sure appreciate it. Thank you, everyone. Have a safe trip home.